River Water and the Colorado River Water Conservation District acting by its through its Colorado River Project Enterprise. Happy New Year, everyone. And can we have roll call?
Alden Vandenbrink.
Here.
Harry Dennison.
Here.
Doug Munger.
Here.
Don Eby. Kathy Chandler Henry.
Here.
Mark Catlin.
Here.
Mark Rober.
Here.
Mike Richard. Reby Hazard.
Here.
Scott McGinnis.
Here.
Sonia Chavez. Here. Stan Winery.
Here.
Steve Beckley.
Here.
Taylor Haas.
Here.
Tom Gray.
Here.
Great, thank you. We do have a quorum, and Stan and Reby, thank you for being here virtually. I'm not getting out on the busy roads. Our first agenda item is to review the meeting agenda. Do we have any additions or comments to that?
Madam President, the staff would recommend that we add an item under 5B, which would be an adoption of a resolution for outgoing directors for Marty Whitmore.
Any other changes, additions to the agenda? All right, do we have a motion to approve?
Hazard.
Okay, moved by Vandenbrink, second by Hazard, and all in favor?
Aye.
Any? Right, the agenda is approved. Next up is presentation and report of directors' credentials for Garfield, Gunnison, Montrose, Uray, and Rio Blanco counties.
And I would tell you, and Stephanie, tell me if I'm incorrect, we have credentials for Garfield, Gunnison, Uray, and Rio Blanco. Montrose County Commissioners are expected to make an appointment tomorrow. All indications are they are not anticipating a replacement of their current
I also have Gunnison.
Gunnison. Perfect. We do have those, and so I believe everything is appropriate. I think we do have two new board members. One incoming from Gunnison who has a bit of knowledge about the district. For those directors who don't know, Sonia Chavez worked at the district for several years and left only after excelling here at the district and helping us get some amazing federal grant money, helping on the salinity efforts down the and salinity efforts down the Gunnison, and left us after acing the Water Leaders program in order to go run the Upper Gunnison Water Conservancy District, which I think is a fantastic move. So
Sandy and
Sonia,
I
welcome
come back and it still benefits
Sonia's here, and then Carrie Dennison is coming in from Uray County. Carrie has been a longtime Uray County representative or resident. I had the pleasure of knowing Carrie for 25 years probably. Carrie worked previously with Trout Unlimited. Carrie, I guess I'm not clear on your current scope of employment, so I don't want to make stories up. I could say things that I've heard, but I don't know if any of it's true. But so if you maybe let them introduce where you are today, what you're doing.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Nice to be here. I live in Uray County and been working in the water world for a long time and throughout the Gunnison Basin, originally from the North Fork, neighbors to Mark here for a long time. But I currently work for a holdings company where we manage some ranches and some private ag ground in the Upper Klamath Basin, and where we're doing restoration and trying to restore some cattle ground and some fisheries, and working with partners in the basin to address some water shortages and fisheries needs there. And was working for the Katina Foundation out of Carbondale for a short period. But my role there has been greatly diminished and I've been moving over to this ranch management position. So nice to be here. Nice to see everyone.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome, Carrie, welcome, Sonia. We're excited to have you, and also welcome back, Alden and Mark and Steve. Thank you. We are glad you're back as well. All right, next up is election of officers for 2024, and our vice president is going to run the president nomination and election.
Well, it may be a corrupted election. Since that seems to be one of the topics. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to open nominations for president. Are there any nominations for president?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. McBain.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, of course, I'm honored to nominate the Chandler Henry, but we all are experienced with her leadership. She's been our chairwoman for the last year. She's run excellent meetings. She's on top of everything. There's not too much to say other than your performance certainly justifies the renomination. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm honored to make that nomination, put it in place, and frankly, I hope we do it unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McGinnis. Are there any seconds?
Second.
Second by Ms. Haas. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, nominations are closed. So, all those in favor of Kathy Chandler Henry, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? None. Welcome to the chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. White.
If I may, just for the little wisdom for our incoming directors, our board has a self-imposed term limit of 2 years for officers. And so this will be President Chandler Henry's second year as president. And after that, she'll just be a board member.
Well, thank you for your confidence, and I do appreciate it. I think this is a great honor to represent the River District, and I'm all in for this year. It's going to be a big year. So thank you very much. We will now open nominations for election of vice president. Do we have any nominations? Mr. Munger.
Yeah, Madam Chair, so I move that we re-elect Mark Catlin as the vice president.
Second.
All right, we have a nomination by Director Munger, second by Wilbur and Van Pring. Would you like to say it?
Oh. Well, you never tell a politician what you like to say. Well, what I would like to say is that in my career, this has been one of the most important things that I've done. Colorado River District is really feels its shadow is big. We don't have a lot of staff. We don't have a lot of money. We don't have a lot of the things that some of those that we compete with do. But we do have 15 directors that care deeply. And we do have a staff that is committed to doing the things that the Colorado River needs. For that, I'm very proud to be one of your members and also as your vice president. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Catlin. Are there any other nominations for vice president? All those in.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna move that we close nominations and cast unanimous ballot for Director Catlin.
Second.
Second by Roper. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Richard, thank you. I'm glad you made it through the wilds. It's so calm here in Sunland.
Yeah, it is. Go there.
Right. Thank you. Welcome. All right, next up, we have appointment of committees for 2024. And Ken, you wanna read us through that?
Yeah, if I could, I think the first committee is the executive committee, and that is has a rotational practice that this board and our bylaws engage in. And so it rotates through in the various drainages and sub drainages in the district. And so for this year, Vice President Chandler Henry President Chandler Henry and Vice President Catlin will be ex officio members of that executive committee, together with our representative from Uray, Pitkin, Saguache, Grand, and Rio Blanco. So that's on our executive committee. And then with respect to the other committees, staff collected comments and requests from board members previously. we are working to put those together, I should say. President Chandler Henry is working to put that together. The one committee that may be more active this year, given our trial scheduled in May, is the litigation committee. And so by noon, if we can take about 5 minutes with President Chandler Henry, we will have those confirmed and announced out to everybody. But if I want to make sure our 2 new directors have had a chance to weigh in, and if you have not, come talk to me during a break before lunch, and we'll talk about it. Okay. And just by way of to remind everybody, we have an investment committee, an information and outreach committee, a litigation committee, and a water supply projects committee. So those committees have various levels of activity. We've actually tried to do a little bit more with the committees in the last few years than previously, but it is, I would say, investment committee is kind of a fun one right now. We're actually making money in interest, which for years we had not. So that's kind of interesting to see for us. But anyway, I think that's.
All right, great. So we will announce those later this afternoon. We have 2 resolutions for outgoing directors, and we will start with Kathleen Curry. I think you have the resolution in your packet, recognizing Director Curry for her service for 3 years. And we'll just go ahead and adopt these separately. So I need a motion to adopt the resolution for Kathleen Curry.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vandenbrink, second by McGinnis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and the next is a resolution for Marty Whitmore, and Marty, you've served the Colorado River District for 9 years. So it's a good term of service. Do we have a motion to approve that resolution? Director Dennison,
Hazard.
second by Robert, and Hazard. We'll just put both on there. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we do thank very much Director Whitmore and Director Curry for their service. Marty Whitmore also served as Vice President and President of the River District and has been of great service, so we wish them well.
And
First female vice president.
First female.
yeah, Vice President and President,
Yeah.
clearing the way for.
That's right.
The only other thing I might mention in relation to those 2 resolutions is we will invite both of them back, as is our custom in at our July barbecue at the River District. And so we'll have a chance to toast and roast them, and look forward to that.
Thanks, Andy. Next up is the consent agenda. We have 5 items on consent. Designation for posting notices, and I believe we are now allowed to do that electronically. So those notices will be on our website and also mailed out to each of the counties in the district. Reappointment of Andy Mueller as General Manager, Peter Fleming as General Counsel, and Roger Maggard as Treasurer. Confirmation of Assistant Secretary, which is Audrey Turner. Approval of minutes and actions for meetings in October and December, and acceptance of treasurer's reports, check registers, and draft financials for October of 2023. Do you have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Haas, second by Catlin. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, now we are jumping right into the meat of things with the general counsel's report. You'll get us into executive session for this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would make a recommendation that the board adopt a motion to convene into executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-6-402, paren 4B and E, to discuss the items listed on your agenda, tab 7A.
So moved. Director Chavez.
Second.
Second by Dennison. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are in executive.
And before we jump into executive session, I just say for the record, the substance of the communications in executive session will constitute attorney-client communications for which no further recording needs to be made. seems like we are out of executive session. And I would state for the record, Madam Chair, that during the executive session portion of the River District's meeting today, the board discussed staff and council, the items that they listed in agenda 10.7A. There was, I believe, 2 items that we discussed that were right for potential action by the board. The first is a proposal that the board authorize the River District upon approval with by general counsel and general manager, a contract with Bishop Brogdon Associates in the amount up to $60,000 to provide technical assistance in support of the Shoshone permanency effort.
Okay, do we have a motion to that effect or any further discussion?
So moved.
Moved by Director Haas,
Second.
second by Director. All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved for a contract up to $60,000 for BBA.
Thank you. The next item was related to the negotiations with Colorado Springs over its diligence and the Montgomery Reservoir enlargement, and let Jason take the proposed recommendation on that.
Sure, we would recommend that the board approve the settlement agreement and authorize the president of the board to execute the necessary settlement documents in the application of CSU case number 15 CW 3019 in Water Division 5, which also includes an enlargement of Montgomery Reservoir.
Motion. So moved. Moved by Director Haas,
Second.
second by Director Gray. All those in favor?
Aye. Thank you. And the next item I also asked Jason to take the lead on is a new item. This is discussed on page 165 of the report or board materials. And it's regarding a proposed intergovernmental agreement with the West Divide Water Conservancy District regarding providing augmentation water in the Gunnison County portion of the Crystal River Basin.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. West Divide Water Conservancy District operates a retail augmentation plan, sort of up and down the Colorado River, as well as up into the Crystal. They currently do not have, their boundaries do not extend into the Gunnison County portion of the Crystal River. In 2018, the Division of Water Resources honored a call on the Crystal River. They agreed not to, which would have put a number of municipalities either completely or partially out of priority. These would have included domestic and municipal rights as well. They agreed not to curtail those rights so long as West Divide and the River District kind of worked on a plan to address this issue. Staff here at the River District has been working closely with West Divide. West Divide has a number of contract water supplies. They are currently in conversations for some small bits of storage up in the Crystal to assist with these issues. But like I pointed out, their current district boundaries don't extend into Gunnison County. The River Districts do. So they are requesting that we enter into an intergovernmental agreement with them to allow them to serve those augmentation needs. Since West Divide will primarily be responsible for developing those augmentation sources up there, we currently don't have any sources either. The River District doesn't. We think this makes good sense as they already operate a retail plan. It would just allow them to further go up the Crystal River into Gunnison County.
Director Munger.
I have a silly question. Does that mean they have to open their aug plan case and go back through and?
They would have to probably,
Dig
they
up
would have
that
to get
whole
those
ball of
supplies included. Yeah, they might do, you know, they operate these augmentation plans, like they have an area A plan, an area B plan, an area C plan. They may not want to open up the entire augmentation plan. They may just file an application for an area C plan. I don't know exactly how they're planning on approaching that.
Okay.
Dennis.
Why did it not extend into Gunnison County originally?
great question. I have no idea.
The original
know-
district was set up to develop the West Divide project, which was supposed to be a bureau, federally funded project that took water out of the Crystal River Basin. Transferred it into the West Divide area above Rifle, so that area. Just, it was never intended to serve that area.
Same could be said with the Basalt District that kind of runs up the other side of the river too,
Right.
you know, it just.
I think this is a really good idea because the Upper Gunnison does from time to time get calls to find out if we provide augmentation water to folks in that area, and we of course have to say no, so this might be a good way to do it.
Your question? We have a suggested action. We have a motion to approve the proposed intergovernmental agreement between West Divide Water Conservancy District and Colorado River District.
So moved.
Moved by Vandenbrink,
Longer seconds.
second by Monger. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
We need more augmentation supplies in Colorado, period.
Thank you.
Motion is approved. Thank you.
The next item, also asked Jason to take up on page 166, which is the annual review and approval of any rate increases from special counsel.
Yes, as laid out in the memo, the rates for 2024 for our current special counsel are listed there. I would note that both of those firms provide us with a governmental discount over what their normal rates are. So those hourly rates are discounted. We think, given the current legal market, those special counsel rates are reasonable, and we recommend the board approve 2024 rates for the River District Special Counsel.
So moved, Director Chavez.
Moved by Chavez,
Seconded.
second by Dennison. All those in favor?
Aye.
Rates are approved for 2024.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item on the agenda is General Counsel's 2024 goals and objectives. I did want to point out that one of the items discussed in the report, but not on your agenda, is the Utah District Court entered an order denying basically affirming the Utah State Engineer's decision not to give a Utah water right to Water Horse Resources, which is an entity that is owned by Aaron Million, which is basically the Green River Pump Back project that he's tried a million times. We actually participated before the Utah State Engineer to provide some input on what that project would face and work within Colorado in order to obtain a Colorado water right, which we argued was necessary for that entity to use water within Colorado. The state engineer agreed. We decided not to participate at the district court level and rely on the state of Utah and water districts within the state of Utah because they were opposing the project. Similar arguments were made, and the state of Utah, or the district court, even pointed to some of the points that we had made at the state engineer level, agreed, basically killed the project entirely within Utah. Where it goes from now is anybody's guess. Wyoming or somewhere else in Utah, who knows? But we will continue to follow that. But it was a good win for those opposed to that project, as the River District historically has been. General Counsel's 2024 goals and objectives on page 167. As I shortened those, cut out a couple that we have either completed or have sort of not dropped off the radar screen, but are no longer top level priorities. As mentioned in the report, those goals and objectives are sort of just the top ones. That's not all we do by a long shot, obviously. Spent a lot of time, for example, during the legislative session, working very closely with Zane and Andy and others, Amy on, you know, state legislation, things like that aren't mentioned in here as well. There are, you know, it's possible that among these topics, there are discussions about where we're headed that might be better suited for discussion in executive session. And otherwise, to the extent you have any comment on that, welcome any input on that or anything else in the general counsel report.
Any questions, comments for Peter? Goals and objectives or anything else from the report? I did have one, which was, that's a pretty hefty list of goals for the year, and you feel like you've got appropriate capacity.
Well, I never said they're all gonna get accomplished. Said we're gonna work on these goals, yeah. That's in jest, obviously, but also true. You know, not that, you know, it's, there's that saying, it's water time for a reason, right? A lot of these things take a lot of time. But no, I appreciate that the input there, and it is shortened to some extent, and some of these things take a lot more time than others, but I'm happy with the, you know, if the board is happy, you take direction from the board. If you'd rather me have fewer top priorities, that's fine. If you'd rather have me have more, we can do that as well. If there's nothing on that, the only other thing I wanted to mention, and it's an important one, is that also consistent with the, you know, discussion on general counsel objectives and so forth from October, that I have, that we have promoted Jason to the position of Deputy General Counsel of the Colorado River District, and I hope everybody join me when appropriate in congratulating Jason on that point.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Jason. Congratulations.
I don't have anything
All right.
further. I would note that we're actually only 15 or 17 minutes in.
Very impressive.
Yeah, I get a good start.
Sorry, well, actually, we do have public comment. Our next agenda item is public comment. If any members of the public would like to make any comments to the board on any items.
We have members of the public online. I don't see any indication, hands raised or anything else.
Okay. Thank you very much. And with that, we will close public comment and move to general manager's report.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. I just hitting that last item in the general counsel's public report. I do want to thank the board for authorizing the retention of our third attorney position. Bruce has hit the ground running in combination with Jason and Peter, as they are extremely busy and extremely helpful to the rest of staff in terms of achieving our goals. So really can't tell you how much I appreciate having 3 full-time attorneys. And they still won't let me practice, but doesn't mean I'm not going to keep trying. So, I want to talk about the Shoshone Water Rights Preservation campaign. Again, my memo covers this, but thank you very much for having a special meeting and hosting our coalition partners mid-month, last month before Christmas. It is a very important milestone, bringing that coalition together and keeping us moving in one direction is really critical. And it allowed us to catch our breath for about a day as staff, and we immediately launched on that little list of items that you see. I think it's page 3 of 10 of my memo, but page 176 of the PDF packet. I won't hit all of those items, but I just want to point out that work on Shoshone does involve a significant number of staff efforts and from all of our different teams at the district. And it's really a great example, I think, of our district staff being able to work as a team, an interdisciplinary team, and they're doing a fantastic job. We'll say kind of highlight a couple important issues. The 29th of this month, January, in the afternoon. The exact time is not been set by a public agenda that I've seen yet, but we anticipate it being around 1:15 or 1:30. The CWCB will be taking up some remaining questions on their non-reimbursable investments, including the Shoshone matter. We, as you know, have a pending $20 million grant request with the CWCB on that issue. Staff, myself, Peter, and others will be present for that. I believe President Chandler Henry has offered to be there on behalf of the district. We are asking and actually anticipate, we're gonna have to ask our coalition partners, all 18 of them, are likely to have representatives at that meeting as well. It's been a lot of work from staff, working with the CWCB staff on in terms of an in-stream flow agreement. That does not need to be approved by their board on the 29th. It's really just a focus on the grant. But there are important substantive questions as to how the district and the CWCB will work together through that process. And I think it's really helpful to get some of those questions discussed and hopefully headed in the right direction. I think we're doing that. I think it is great work. There remain some questions out there. I think hopefully in a workshop on the January 25th that the CWCB board is having with its staff, which will be virtual, we'll be in attendance to be able to answer questions should they arise. We would anticipate a lot of the questions that may remain to be discussed. But again, we're very optimistic that the CWCB staff and the AG's office are very helpful in kind of teeing up these questions, outlining how we move forward together in a partnership with the CWCB. We have, I have started a process of meeting in person with all 18 of our governing bodies of all 18 of our coalition members. We're trying to line it up with Stephanie's help and Lindsay and Marielle's help. We're getting them all on the calendar. I met last week with 4 of our Grand Valley entities in different meetings. Would just say that they're all very thankful to the River District Board for its work on this, and have indicated that they are all coming up with funds to support the effort out of their own treasuries. They each will be making commitments, formal commitments at a later date, fairly soon, but nonetheless later. All of them are very excited. We'll be working our way up the river. So at some point, those of you on the main stem should expect to see me. I will probably be tapping you well before I show up to make sure that you can show up with me. Or in the case of some people, sit on the other side of the table and get us funding, right? Commissioner Chandler Henry. So it's really exciting. It's I would just say there's a lot going on there. To the extent that any of the board might be inclined, we would welcome your attendance on the 29th in Aurora. It is important for that statewide body to know that this is an important issue for the entire River District and certainly the main stem of the Colorado. Any questions on the Shoshone effort?
I just have one real quick one. So I mean, and I'm glad we're able to do that, but I hope that we're keeping track, some time coding or something with our staff so that we can kind of in kind, by the way, this is what we're staffed that we put into this as well. I don't know if is that a good idea or, I mean, you know, we're coming up with the $20 million, but again, so I want to have entities come back and, well, you just threw in money, you guys really didn't do anything. So.
Right. I normally would say that we could do that. I will just say that touches on something that I've tried to do administratively with our staff, which is for years, we had 20 or 30, some instances, 35 different time codes that each of our staff members were supposed to track their time.
Yeah, okay.
And coming in from the private law practice, I thought that was something I was getting away from. I came in here and learned that we were doing the same, and so then dug into it to find out how often we use that data to improve the services the district was delivering or track it for other purposes. And with the exception of some of our grants that we work together with the states or others, or feds, the data has not historically been used, and what it was doing was taking a lot of staff time
Fill out the time.
to fill out the timesheets. And I would rather have our staff spend time on productive, substantive issues. So for anybody who's interested, you're welcome to take a look, for instance, at my time codes, which in the last 3 months have gone from very detailed to very general. And so I don't have that tracking right now. We have some pretty good estimates though, Doug, and I will tell you that with our partners, all of them, both local, state and federal, I have been stressing the amount of time that we're putting into this. And I think our partners understand that. I don't think anybody thinks that this is just a money thing for the district.
That's fine. I would just wanted to ask.
But maybe to follow up on that, this will probably be a grant at some point, right? So do we need that in kind to show up for the grant purposes, either fed or state?
Yeah, the state doesn't require matching. We actually currently have a $20 million one-to-one grant match with the state on this because of the commitment that this board made on the 19th of December. Before we end up formally in front of the Bureau of Reclamation on a grant request, we hope to have a minimum of $10 million from our local partners as well. So that would put us in at a 50% match at the federal level. Just dollar for dollar.
Right.
I suppose it couldn't hurt to have the in-kind.
I mean, if
as
you can
well.
estimate
Yeah,
it, great.
we'll definitely be able to estimate.
Always helps.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that thought.
Andy, before you move on, I just wanted to add thanks on behalf of the board to all the staff and to you and Peter and, you know, Marielle coming up with the logo at the last minute and Lindsay getting all the press there and the whole team making that room available at the Colorado Hotel. And it was such a big event. People are talking about it on the streets in Eagle County and I'm sure elsewhere too. So I know, I mean, it's been a long time coming and then a last minute rush to make it all happen on that afternoon, right after Crua in Vegas and people were sick and busy and everything else. And it was amazing and exciting. So thanks on behalf of the board for all that work.
Thank you. I think that the credit goes to our amazing staff. They really did an amazing job putting that together and continue to. I mean, I just want to say there are, I think I ended my little brief on this in the memo by saying there are a lot of balls in the air. There are a whole lot of pieces moving on this transaction and could not do that without a very competent and energetic staff. So I think everybody here is doing a great job. Thank you. And thank you all for coming during the immediately before maybe the holiday season and showing up and participating in that meeting. And it's a testament to what we're doing to see all of our partners show up at that meeting as well. So I think it's great. I want to turn for a quick update on Senate Bill 23-295, the Colorado River Drought Task Force. Detailed information is contained in my memo. I think it's a fascinating statement. Really just want to focus on this district's direction. Myself and Peter as alternates under our guiding principles, trying to get the state to the legislature to take a position with respect to how a conserved consumptive use program might work in our state. Taking the principles that were adopted from a document from 2018, the CWCB's demand management policy statement, together with our the Senate Bill 295 itself, and quite a bit of work that this district had done. We crafted a proposal that had several elements in terms of what we think any program ought to have in it. It was interesting in that it failed. That proposal ultimately we tried to modify it to meet some people's objections and see if we couldn't gain enough support for it. But in the end, it failed 7-9 in a vote. I think it's unfortunate. What we heard at the time from a number of representatives of either the state government or the Front Range was that that proposal was premature because there's no current conserved consumptive use program, and that it might somehow, by having the legislature weigh in on how a future program might operate, it might interfere with our negotiations, our state's negotiator and the positions she may or may not be taking in the interstate level. You know, I think I addressed this in our minority report that's cited in your memo and connected there, hyperlinked. You know, honestly, there is an ongoing conserved consumptive use program in the state being run by the UCRC. In that there's 17,000 acre feet of depletions or contributions that is being currently offered through applications to our state in the UCRC. Of that, just over 16,000 acre feet come off the West Slope. There are no robust guidelines or principles involved in preventing injury to other water users. There's a review that is going on by our state engineer, and we appreciate that. But it's not what we're used to and the level that we're used to in our state from individual water users being able to receive notice of actions or that may impact their water use. So we remain concerned about where our state is headed with conserved consumptive use programs in the future, whatever the name may be. I don't think this effort is over. I think if you read some of the comments from others, I would anticipate that should additional conserved consumptive use programs be seen in the future, which I think is highly likely, we should expect to have some additional robust discussion and hopefully more support for a framework that doesn't leave any corner of our state behind or target areas to produce the water for the benefit of the rest of the state. There is some desire to benefit or to balance private property interests and make sure that the opportunities presented by these programs is available to our water users. And I certainly appreciate that. I think our district, at least the direction I've received to date from our board, is that we also at this district have a broader responsibility to our communities and our industries that depend upon water, not just today and not just for a quick buck, but in the future to make sure that that water remains present in Western Colorado for future use by our communities and our folks. So it is, there are balances in there. It's always going to be a tough issue. I do think that we'll keep this issue is not going away, is what I'm saying. So I think that that's an important one to keep in mind. I'm happy to take questions or comments about that proposal or the other proposal that we turned into a narrative to avoid a negative vote, which was what I would just sum up by saying lower basin first proposal that says, hey, here's your history of overuse. Would you please fix it before we start conserving water in the upper basin? Given the proportionate use of water under our compact allotment compared to their overuse of water far in excess of their compact allotment. That too was not destined for success at that task force. Interestingly, I don't think most people disagreed with the idea that the lower basin has a lot of work to do. But I think it was feared somehow that may interfere with our state's ability to negotiate current discussions at the interstate level. Any questions on the drought task force? I do want to thank our President Chandler Henry for volunteering to chair that task force in a non-voting capacity. Did a great job with a bunch of fairly hard to corral folks on that, myself included. Task force met all over the western slope and in the Metropolitan Front Range twice, so.
Right. And I would just note that the Two River District proposals are in the report, they're in the hands of the legislators, so I feel like even though the task force didn't vote to move them forward, that's not who proposes legislation, so they may very well have future life in them.
Here, no questions or comments on that, just turning quickly to the interstate issues. As I think many of you are aware, the 7 states in the Bureau of Reclamation are trying to reach a consensus proposal as to what the 2026, post-2026 interim guidelines for the operations of Powell and Meade will look like. The Bureau of Reclamation has set a deadline for a 7-state consensus proposal to occur in early March. I think that's an ambitious timeframe. I think that their states are currently pretty far apart from agreement. Those of you who either were at CRUA and attendance at CRUA or may have read about it afterwards, you could see the kind of large gap between our commissioner, Becky Mitchell, and some of the lower basin states. I think I do applaud our commissioner for speaking frankly about these issues. I think a lot of times in water diplomacy, the diplomacy is such that you can't really understand what people are saying, and so it is a little vague. I think Becky is doing a good job communicating directly. It has caused some folks in the lower basin to be a little upset with our commission. That is the job she has. It's never going to please everybody in that position. I do want to just flag something I mentioned in the report, which is the Bureau of Reclamation. It sounds like is very close to releasing a final report on conserved consumptive uses. On consumptive uses and losses for the lower basin. This is a report that should be issued every 5 years. We haven't seen one since 2005, so there's we're missing many years of reports. I understand that report is supposed to be finalized by the end of this month. Drafts of that we've seen, and I know everybody in this room will be shocked. The consumptive uses and losses by the lower basin are far in excess of anything their math shows, and specifically their tributary use is incredibly beyond the 1 million acre feet that is designated for them under Article 3 of the 1922 Compact.
And is that losses? Is that the transit and evaporation losses or?
Well, we've certainly asked the Bureau to have that in there. Our understanding is that the report will not include system losses, so neither the transit losses nor the evaporation of their lower basin system reservoirs. But even with that, the numbers are likely to be over an average of over 10 to 10.5 million acre feet a year, not including Mexico, not including the system losses, President Chandler Henry, that you're talking about. So really significantly above the consumptive uses and losses report for the upper basin, which does, by the way, come out every year and is reported to the Bureau by the 4 states in the upper basin, consistently shows the upper basin below 4.5 million acre feet out of our 7.5 million acre feet allotment. And in some years like 2021, it is as low as 3.5 million acre feet. And you can compare that to the upper basin or the lower basin at 10.5 or above. Certainly, if you start including evaporative and transit losses, it quickly hits 13 million acre feet. And so something to keep in mind, it really does show that what many people thought that equitable apportionment in 1922, which was supposed to be a 50-50 deal, appears not to be 50-50. So something something has to change, and one could think perhaps the supply will change and we'll actually have an adequate supply of water to meet all of those needs. I'm not among those who think that's likely to happen. I think the change is going to happen on the demand side. And primarily, if you look at where those consumptive numbers are, it still makes all the sense in the world to have it occur in the lower basin where they are using vastly in excess of their allotment. Again, the details are coming out. Remember, that report only goes through 2015, so it's 10 years, which is great. And I do applaud the Bureau for finally getting around to getting those out. I think that we are still in need of the numbers from 2015 through 2025 and or at least 2020, which would be really helpful to have current numbers so that we can, as we discuss policy and governance structure, have the actual accurate data is really critical. And right now there's an absence of that data in the case. Any comments? Yeah.
Just a question. Has there been a commitment from the Bureau to try to get caught up with those numbers in this, or is?
Let our Director of Interstate and Science and Interstate Matters answer that one.
Yeah, the word commitment is interesting because this is a commitment that came out of the basin study. And so Reclamation made the commitment at that time to do exactly what you're asking about. They're doing it in a piecemeal fashion. You heard about the main stem losses, uses and losses. Next will be the TRIBs up to 2015. And they have a timeline that whether they stick to it or not, they're committed to rolling out to present, basically, and getting those reports out. And I think by the end of 2024, we should be somewhere further on that path in advance of, the negotiations. But you've already heard the negotiations are ongoing, so it's a tricky timeline, but the commitment's out there. Whether or not if and when they come out, there's a plan to do so.
Great, thank you.
And I would say the data is really important. Having it by the end of 2024 may not help us. I think the Bureau is trying to push the states to get a consensus on the governance to avoid the politics of an election year. I am afraid that they will not be successful in avoiding that. And so we'll be smack in the middle of potentially another contested presidential election, and it will not help good policy being developed in the Colorado Basin to be there.
So it brings up the question, so how do you analyze the guidelines when you don't have the information put forth on them? So I guess I'd like to fill out my tax returns that way too.
I coming from a CPA, that's an interesting comment. I think you're absolutely right. I don't think it doesn't lead to good policy. It doesn't lead to good decision.
Yep, thank you.
Yep. I just had a question. We've consistently in the upper basin said we don't want to do any curtailment until the lower basin gets within their allocation, or however you say it. How are we also, as an upper basin or negotiator, are we offering a path forward instead of just saying no, not? Are we saying but here? Are we offering anything?
I think that there are opportunities to offer solutions there. I don't sense that the negotiations right now between the states are to that point.
That makes sense.
Okay. Anything else? Nothing else on that. I would call Don and DK to present on Colorado River Basin hydrology. Because it was a wet spring and summer down in the lower basin, you'll see some unprecedented low consumptive use numbers coming through here in DK's report.
Good afternoon. You'll see the memo, I believe, on PDF page 247. We've taken some of the highlights and put them here graphically for your viewing pleasure. For those veterans, this is gonna look familiar. For new directors, this is kind of the format we've come to. Starting out with sort of the headlines. Early dryness throughout most of the basin is sort of what we're looking at. But as you know, this is changing as we speak. And our folks in the Yampa may not agree with that assessment at all. But you know, you've heard about El Nino. We're starting to see a change. Whether or not that's due to El Nino is unclear, but there's a lot more energy and moisture streaming in to the region. The early forecasts, take these with a grain of salt, of course, are well below average. These are coming from essentially the official forecast in December. And I'm anticipating, while I'm speaking, the new forecast and 24-month study will be released. So these are a little bit old. They will go up a little bit, but not a lot. Because you'll see regionally, it's been, this dry signal is pretty prevalent. So operation wise, again, these are just the headlines you're seeing here. And the crystal ball is still very cloudy, but we do know, unless something changes, Glen Canyon release of 7.48 million acre feet is on the lower side. That's gonna help retain water in Lake Powell, of course. The lower basin is declared in tier 1 shortage. That means Central Arizona in particular will take a hit, but not as big as last year. And then for us in Western Colorado, you'll hear from Dawn. The news is relatively okay. We have reasonably good carryover storage. Most of the facilities should fill, with the exception maybe of Blue Mesa. And some may spill in the headwaters of the Colorado. And so we're coming off of a very wet 2023, but if you look at what's happened in the last 6 months here in Colorado and across the globe, actually, we're in record warm territory. Scientists, climatologists now have confirmed that, as your memo says, 2023, the warmest ever on the globe. And here in Western Colorado, setting records in Eastern Montrose County, in the Southwest, and across the Grand Valley. So that is really the challenge that we're facing. And then on top of that, the last 6 months, even though we had a really great snowpack of 2023, the last 6 months ending in December, you can see that same bullseye in Eastern Montrose County, some of the record driest, at least from a precipitation point of view, and that extends throughout the Southwest. So this is what we've experienced, right? So we know that what's coming up next, a little bit based on what we're seeing in the soil moisture. We know that soil moisture has changed dramatically. You can see kind of on the left panel, the fall of 22, dramatically different from a year later, but you still have quite a bit of dry conditions across, especially the southern part of the upper Colorado, and a flip in the lower basin where on the Mogollon Rim, things were a little bit better in the upper Gila. And you can kind of see there in the lower portion, that's extremely dry. And I'll just turn on the laser pointer and make sure we're looking at the same region here. You know, this is essentially the headwaters to the Gila, and things have really dried out, which doesn't bode well for their users down there. Looking forward, I mentioned El Nino. Still looking at pretty warm conditions, but as you go south, the signal is starting to appear where it's a little cooler and maybe a little wetter. This is looking forward next 3 months essentially, but this is a little bit old. And again, this is gonna be updated here next week. And on top of that, you know, if we look at where we've been, again, that 6-month period, super dry, but it just, the change is occurring, and this is as of yesterday. Don pulled this up. You can kind of see a glimpse of hope here in the upper Colorado River Basin, where most of the snowpack falls and arises. But the upper green, pretty harsh and pretty dire if you looked downstream. Again, we know that 90% of the inflow to Lake Powell comes above here in the upper basin. So this is really good news, and we're hoping that pattern continues. When you look at this sort of plot, it gives a little bit more resolution. There's a lot going on here, but you can essentially see two different numbers for each of the basins. Left-hand side is sort of water year precipitation to date, and then snowpack precipitation to date in the 80s and 90s.
Is that today?
This is pretty much as of today. And then in the gray boxes, you can kind of see where the reservoirs, the main reservoirs are in terms of storage capacity or storage of capacity. Lake Powell, of course, extremely low, still in record low territory, 36% of capacity. And we're hoping, of course, that this spring brings a bounty to help us out there. But it's a mixed bag, and we know, and I want you to keep in mind, this is very early. Things can change almost on a dime. But again, when you look across the basin, thanks to our external affairs department, we have this great picture that really puts it into focus in terms of percent capacity. And your eye goes to Flaming Gorge, pretty good situation. Blue Mesa, not great, but not terrible. Navajo, and as you go further south, it really just gets worse. Lake Powell and Lake Mead, you know, hovering around that 1/3 full. And then there's a bunch of ways to look at this, and we're gonna inundate you with a few plots here, but this one, the simplest one, just shows Lake Powell levels still in that, you know, very low minimum to 10th percentile over history, last 30, 40 years. And I guess if there's a glint of good news, it's stable at that low level. When you look at this more complicated plot of all the storage upstream or across the basin, really includes Mead, Lake Mojave, and Havasu at the bottom. What this plot is showing, and I stole this from Utah State University, that we're essentially right back where we were 2 years ago. We had a really nice recovery, but we're really still in that territory where we haven't made a lot of difference. And the prognosis is that we're kind of in that holding pattern. And I see people taking pictures. This is available, and we can make sure you get this. It'll be on our website, I believe, here shortly. And then that was sort of the longer record, right? Going back to 2000. If you zoom into those last 2 years I just mentioned, you can kind of see that recovery. But again, the start and the end, you're pretty much at the same spot for that big blue line at the top. Lake Powell shows that really nice recovery, but again, right back to where we started. So we made up a deficit, but we have a long way to go. This is really important when you talk about some of the concepts coming out for the negotiations and the reset. Some people are talking about, well, let's look at total storage, right? And even if you look at total storage, that blue line, it shows you that we're vulnerable, basically, and we can't necessarily rely on that as the single parameter in which to base our operational decisions. And again, slicing, dicing, and looking at the data, this one is a popular one to look at over the period of record, 100 years, where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. Here on the right-hand side, sort of the projections, the 50th most probable trace. You know, it's comparable to those dry years that we just went through. We're not looking at a real bounty unless things change. And that's what this 10th percentile bar could represent. But we're well below the average. This is for unregulated inflow. It's relatively recent. It does not include the last storm, however. And again, this is being updated as we speak, so it just puts it into perspective on where we are and where we've been. When you take that volume and you put it into the magic models that Reclamation runs, you get this sort of cloud of possibilities, right? And unfortunately, it's what we've got to live with, the uncertainty in hydrology, and we're making decisions essentially 12 to 24 months in advance, right? So here we are, and again, many of you have seen this and hopefully becoming familiar. The uncertainty spreads today going forward, and they make an assessment. The red line corresponds to that bar beforehand, the 90th percentile, the dry trace. The green is the 50th or the most likely, according to the stats, and then the blue, that wet trace. So that's kind of the conventional way that Reclamation puts in the inflows and the uses and predicts where we're gonna be next year, for example. And again, we're kind of looking at today, 12 months out, we're almost at the same point. The projections are the amount of water that's flowing into Lake Powell this year is the same amount that's gonna flow out, including evaporation in the upper basin. Now, anything can happen. And inside here, the gray ones are a little bit more refined look at the 30 years that just happened. What would happen if we got the same precipitation and temperature? Last 30 years, that's what the gray is. Okay, and they do the same thing for Lake Mead. Before I go into Lake Mead though, you'll see on the left-hand side, again, these are the operational tiers. And we're looking forward, and they look out 12 months, okay, we're gonna be in the mid-elevation release tier. So more than likely, if this occurs, there'll be another 7.48 million acre foot release from Lake Powell, okay? If it goes above that in upper elevation, you know, and you can see how close we are right now. If it gets wetter, that could mean a bigger release next year. So just keep that in mind, but the green is kind of what Reclamation is planning on. Again, that which comes in essentially goes out for this next 12 months. At Lake Mead, a little bit different, but same technique. Here we are today. You look across 12 months, well, it's actually a little bit lower. We're projecting Lake Mead elevations to decrease in the next 12 and 24 months unless we get a bounty, and that's what the blue line is, a wet operation. And the reason it shoots up like this is it would go into an equalization release, and which is highly unlikely, okay? But they're planning on both ends of the spectrum. All right, so I went through that quickly, but we can come back to it with questions, but I'm gonna hand it over to Don to sort of drill into the upper basin and some of the more familiar areas that you all deal with.
Thanks, DK. So these are snow water equivalent in the light blue, and the dark blue are April to July runoff forecasts at the Basin River Forecast Center in Salt Lake City. I wanted to point out that, okay, we're kind of going north to south, Yampa, Elk, White. If you look at those numbers, they're fairly similar in the north. And again, it's this last weekend that made the big difference in both these numbers, really. But to the north, we are very close to our runoff forecast relative to the percent of snowpack, average snowpack. In the south, not so much. And that's largely due to soil moisture deficit in the southern regions of our district. Blue Mesa particularly is, there's a big difference between 107% of snow water equivalent and 88% runoff. The Dolores is even more, even a bigger difference in those numbers. So take your pick from wherever you happen to be from. Lake Powell, 87% of SWE, snow water equivalent, 75% runoff forecast, as DK pointed out. Now that number has not changed since the first
of January. So that's very interesting. These other numbers, runoff numbers have changed significantly since the first of the official forecast, right, for January 1st. And here's this is just 4 or 5 days ago, right? The 12th, I believe. Statewide snow water equivalent, all very sad news here before the MLK weekend. So I don't have an update here, but this is just to point out how things have changed over the weekend. Those numbers, as we saw on the last slide, are up in the 80s and 90s now, closer to 100%. Here we have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday precipitation, again, over this weekend. Those redder areas are 2 inches or better, so that might be, 1.5 feet, 2 feet of snow in some of those areas. So these 3 days made the big difference. Okay, this was we're in day now. We were in the night. Notice too, it's a north-south imbalance there. A lot of moisture in the north, none in the south over the weekend. Here's why we don't like to write our memos in late December and come and talk to you. This happened over the weekend more than the rest of January. We had just well below average. These are modeled snow, the polygons, and you can see prior to our hitting the send button, we had very poor snow, modeled snow conditions, and then on the right, today's model snow is significantly better, at or above average in a lot of our areas.
Don, are you starting to get any input from the high level flight? Instead of just going on snowtails, we've been funding those.
So you're referring to Airborne Snow Observatory?
Yeah.
So those are programmed typically to coincide with the peak SWE, somewhere on the 1st of April, so we won't get those data until that point. And in fact, we have partial coverage. This year, we will fly the Yampa, or they will fly the Yampa for the first time. North Fork will not have any data this year, but big swaths of the Upper Gunnison and the headwaters are covered, and we'll have 2 flights for most of those areas beginning start of April, depending on how the spring progresses.
Thank you.
So it has a frequency of that data. Real quick, avalanche danger, as you would expect, crusty snow, lack of snow, followed by all this moisture that we got on top. There's sets up conditions for severe, extreme avalanche conditions. Show a lot of these traces. Time series, snowpack at snowtail sites above. In this case, this would be, I guess, above Cameo, right? We're just steaming up towards normal there. Nearly average here, 94% of median. Just a quick hydrograph. I only threw one of these in. This is at Tatsero, of course, with the push for Shoshone permanency. This is relevant. You can see, we had reasonable peak, a late peak due to moist conditions on the east slope, which deterred the Trans Mountain folks from taking water. And then after, once the Green Mountain surplus was released, so there was an abundance of recovered quarter water through the end of November, and then you can see how we dropped down below average, significantly below average, and that really perpetuated our shop operations, right, where folks have agreed, major operators have agreed to, most of them anyway, to act as if the Shoshone power plant we're operating hasn't operated since April. It doesn't look like it'll operate again until April, maybe one turbine next April. So on that note, shop, Shoshone Outage Protocol operations at Green Mountain. This year, because of that, the dryness, the lack of stream flow at Dotsero, we just really hit the allocation in Green Mountain very hard. 2,000 acre feet is, according to the shop agreement, is allocated for shop. The uncontracted volume that has been used already, that is 9,425 acre feet. So that's the 20,000 acre foot uncontracted volume in Green Mountain. Additionally, 2,000 acre feet, about 2,000 has been ponied up by silt. From the silt pool, 12,000 and 45 acre feet released to date. So all combined, looks like we're good through February, and then there's an additional volume of water that's been allocated or will be allocated, hopefully, as part of the contracted pool. And then there's this issue of the shop participants are gonna have to decide whether we honor the 17-day maintenance outage, which is part of the shop agreement. So the assumption is that Shoshone has historically been down for maintenance for about 17 days. That's the number that they came up with. Are we gonna honor that sort of maintenance outage? And I think, reclamation is pretty good. They feel like they're in a good position. Green Mountain's relatively full. And so they're okay with no outage coming up in February. So here we have Green Mountain volume. Historically, on the left there, it's 2,000. You can see in 2002, the reservoir was drawn down significantly, down to what became the restricted release rate volume. There's a couple of green lines in there, wet year target, and then the critically dry year target of 80,000 acre feet. If we look on the right, with the last couple of years, we've been pretty full at Green Mountain, relatively speaking. We're about 75,000 acre feet strong right now at Green Mountain. That's why reclamation feels pretty good about, if we can just allocate more water, it's an art. Of course, CBT pool's not being touched, but we're in a pretty good position now. You can see some of those years that were when the winter target was not met for a dry year, we drew the reservoir down. For instance, 2019 and 2022, we had some very low conditions at Green Mountain last year. This is a graph. I know it's pretty busy, but Wolford, try to show as much as we can here. This looks like an older plot here, so but it does show that we operated in the spring. We had dam safety concerns. We did fill late, and we were also able to operate cross coordinated reservoir operations, and also hold the reservoir down about 4 feet from full as we monitored the dam. Then we actually spilled in about mid-June and spilled through July. Then we released the fish volume. We had a Mosier exchange, and we actually released a little more than our minimum through November as an opportunity to draw the reservoir down a little bit more than we might otherwise have due to the dam safety concerns. Here's so we'll move on to Yampa. I think this is the Yampa, right? We are again cruising up towards median in this case, 96% of median. Again, a time series trace of the snowpack, and there's 2008 is in green there. I think 2018 is the lower, looks like the light brown trace there. So kind of bracketing some of the wetter and drier years there. This looks good, actually. This is a recent plot of our Elkhead operations. So our enterprise operations are being covered here. We did release some spill delay flows early in the spring. And then we had some carryover storage from last year with the short-term lease program. About 833 acre feet was released, followed by the 5,000 acre feet of permanent fish pool releases. And actually conditions were such on the Yampa that that the recovery program decided to retain about 287 acre feet in the reservoir, which is not carried over. So there'll be no carryover going into 2024. But you can see our elevation is very similar to last year, and actually diverging or converging actually onto that elevation. So we're looking to probably draw the reservoir down a little bit early spring this year. This is the white. The white didn't fare quite so well. I think it's 83% of median currently. Again, 2008 is the green trace, and 2018 is the brown trace there. So not so good there in the white in terms of snowpack. And this is the Gunnison, I believe. Again, pushing up towards median or average in the Gunnison Basin. Now I'll hand this over to DK. I believe he's up.
All right, we're getting towards the home stretch here. So Blue Mesa Reservoir, the projections are coming close to fill, but may not fill. Just as I was sitting here and as I predicted, the forecasts came in. It does not include the last weekend. So contrary to what I said, it fell precipitously because it was based on basically the January 1st forecast. I think it's 66% of average inflow for Lake Powell now. So you may be seeing headlines that are a little different from what I started out with, but it's getting worse. And we'll have to kind of build up from there. And Blue Mesa's forecast, I didn't get a chance to jump into it on my phone here, but essentially if it stayed the same, the forecast, again, just to repeat, is that Blue Mesa will come close to filling, but will not fill. We're right now at the winter icing target, they call it. And in so doing, we've reached that point where they have erased the debt that's attributed to that drought response operations volume of 36,000 acre feet and what were released in 2022. So I guess that's a little bit of good news. So that we're basically at the average or desired elevation for Blue Mesa for this time of year. So now hopefully it's going to go down a little bit for winter releases. And then as you can kind of see the historic traces, hopefully climb back up near full. So that's kind of where we end up here. We can take discussions, questions, and move forward.
Dr. Haas. Yeah, thanks, guys. Dave, do you think what you just announced that the numbers went down, do you think that's just a fluke or is it just?
No, it's a reflection of the 6-month dry period, and basically December was not good, November was not good. And so December is typically a good snow accumulation month, since we basically were near, 30% or less or around there.
I think last year, December, remember?
Yeah. So we can still recover. But again, we have a hill to climb.
Okay, thanks.
So great report. Thanks to both of you. The one thing that jumped out at me was the soil moisture. That didn't seem to jive with just what I've been seeing on the ground. And I remember maybe 2 years ago asking the Basin Forecast Center about how that's calculated and if that that's gonna be refined some way, and I got a rather long answer about how
So
they
I'm-
need data sets and it takes a long time to change that. It doesn't seem like we had super bad soil moisture coming through November. Obviously, we've had 2 very dry months, and that's reflected in the forecast, but the runoff efficiency seems a little skewed because of maybe the soil moisture data just isn't aligning with what's actually out there. How is that calculated, and is there gonna be a change to how that data is captured?
So, yeah, this is a pretty complicated question and answer, so I'll try. I was just trying to bring back up that plot, but I got shut down here. So essentially, what we were showing are modeled soil moisture states that the River Forecast Center simulates throughout the year. And as of sort of mid-November, they lock it in. That's a value that stays in the model because essentially you're not getting any changes in soil moisture during the winter. And I think what you were saying, I would agree with, where we've had pretty good soil moisture through the late summer. We had a reasonable monsoon. So soil conditions through their, what they call lump model. It's not a distributed model, even though it looks like a well-resolved depiction. It's really just a single number for these subbasins, right? And so that parameter goes into the model and it stays there unchanged throughout the forecast season until springtime. I think the next part of so that's a very simplified approach. It doesn't reflect the variability that we see that you're maybe talking about. And I think your next part was, well, we are getting all this data, right? And we're starting to see changes throughout the basin, and we've got real-time soil moisture. We don't have quite the network that Utah has, but Colorado's getting better. And the Yampa, the Roaring Fork, those data are not driving the same model results that we're showing here. That will take 10 years to develop basically the mathematical correlations and relationships that we need to feed the model. So it's going to be quite a latency for that data to make a difference anecdotally. And some of the other newer models that are not quite accepted by the River Forecast Center are out there, and you can see reports and data products that do ingest those data. We didn't show that. We just showed the River Forecast Center lumped model state for November as compared to 12 months prior.
Okay, that's super helpful. I just judged it by how many times I got stuck during hunting season. It seemed like a lot, too.
Yep, so that's a good news, and it's gonna help runoff efficiency, we think.
Okay.
Dr. Chavez.
Yeah, I think the NCAR model, and our WRF hydro model that we're using, we have a couple of soil moisture sensors in the Upper Gunnison, and they're showing that actually conditions are worse than when we went into 2022. So I am not expecting, even with average snowfall, to see any kind of rebound in terms of the stream system in the Upper Gunnison. And DK, just to correct on the ASO stuff in the Upper Gunnison, right now I'm showing an $87,000 deficit in our funding to conduct the ASO flights. So if I can't, the CWCB may be able to provide additional funding, but if I can't raise the additional funding, there may only be one flight in the East and the Taylor this year. So I'm working on that.
Other questions for DK or Don? Yeah, Director Munger and Director Gray.
So just quickly, last year we had this huge record snowfall. And then on April 7th wasn't the day of infamy when we had the dust on snow event across the whole state, and it just took out everything we had. I mean, I guarantee we had 110% snow and it all went away that fast. I mean, it just seemed like it vanished. So I don't know, it seems to me like hopefully we might be a little bit better, because I think Nevada and Utah and all that got snow this year too right now. So that might cover up some of that place that we might get dust on snow. So I'm just hypothesizing here a little bit.
Yeah, and I think what you said is a point to drive home, is that things can change on a dime, good or bad. The dust on snow is a very significant issue that we and the climatologists and modelers are trying to grasp. But typically, the southwesterlies that come up. It's not necessarily Utah, it's New Mexico and Four Corners area. That is the main source. And typically the southern basins are much more at risk and susceptible. Last year's event, as you said, reached all the way up to your country and was pretty unusual. We are seeing unfortunate conditions to the west of us, due west, not quite as good as, last year. But hopefully, as you say, it can get covered up and can help us, and the soil moisture down there is a big driver. So down in southwestern and to the west, it just really depends on how those storms, those windstorms come in. Thank you.
Director Green.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just gonna say, I was hoping that the better monitoring and so on that we can do would allow us to get somewhere within the 2026 guidelines where we're gauging the releases from Mead based on hydrology rather than reservoir levels. But it doesn't sound like we're far enough along to quite be able to get there with that.
I mean, I guess the good news is there's more data, there's better data. The bad news is the models are lagging.
Yeah.
And so we can push for different tools, but reclamation has their tried and true methods, which are evolving. And their timeframes are shorter and their latencies are shorter, but that's still a challenge to overcome.
Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. If we could have Brendan come on up to talk about the Slater Park Land Livestock Water Conservation Program application. And it may be dangerous, but we feel just assume that the board has actually read it. And then you can kind of explain. And if anybody on the board hasn't had an opportunity, feel free to ask questions in the interest of time management.
Yeah. I'm just gonna share my screen real quick and I can just show a couple maps that will get us oriented. Second. All right, so water conservation program. This is originally came out of Senate Bill 1319, which was a bill that the River District really worked on, and it was originally identified just for divisions 4, 5, and 6 within the River District boundaries. It has since then been expanded to divisions 1, 2, and 3. So every division except for division 7 has the ability to partake in these water conservation programs. And essentially what these programs do is it protects the water rights from a historical consumptive use analysis, which essentially looks at the value of the water rights by looking at how it's been used and how much water has been consumed by those water rights. And when they're participating in a program like this, typically the point of the program is to reduce the diversions and reduce the amount of consumptive use to put that water back into the stream for, it could be a number of reasons. It could be just for science, or it could be for in-stream flow habitat or water quality or some other purpose. But the idea behind this program is to protect those water rights from potential injury in helping the system out. These flows are not protected, they're not shepherded, they're simply just not diverted, and then it goes downstream for the next diverters. And our district has been approving these plans. Many different entities can approve these, but our district, as far as I know, has been one of the main entities within our district to approve these plans. Most of the time they're smaller. It could be a full fallow or a partial fallow or a change in irrigation, could be a change of crop. So they vary a lot, but in general, they're smaller programs, and we do some due diligence on those as we review them and approve them from staff. But every once in a while, we get a larger applicant and an application, and we want to bring those before the board as we feel like it's a good time to update you guys on the program. It also allows you to help us weigh and review the application and potential impacts to the basin. And that's the case today. So the Slater Park Land and Livestock LLC, along with the Colorado Water Trust and Western Resource Advocates have applied for a program for this water conservation program. They are looking at 680 acres for a late season fallowing. So this would be a fallowing in the later half of the year. It's really the end of the season. Slater Creek is a tributary to the Little Snake River. It's up in Moffett and Routt County. So this end of the year fallowing would help provide flows through these two in-stream flow reaches, which I've shown up here on the screen. So they're in red. The ranch itself is in the black polygon there in the bottom right of the map. So they're the upper portion of the basin. And there are 4 ditches there. Let me go to that page. So 4 ditches that will be participating, which cover 680 acres. And the idea there is to follow those starting July 1st. Those would give a boost to the stream system running through the 2 in-stream flow reaches. That would help with some high water temperature issues that they've had, as well as increasing the habitat. So those are some of the critical months when it's really shallow and warm. And so the idea is to help those reaches. As I said, this program doesn't shepherd the water, so they would just be bypassed. And the advantage to the location of this ranch is that the next downstream irrigators are significantly downstream, upwards of 20 miles till the next significant irrigator. And so there's no necessarily guarantee, but there's no other diverters that will really take this water. That will be there. So one of our big concerns with this application was return flow impact. So on these irrigation fields, as they're irrigating, that water seeps into the ground. It's then lagged over several months, maybe even years, as it comes back down to the stream system. And our concern originally with this application was just, wanting to make sure that those downstream irrigators aren't impacted. And the applicants listened, and they had Leonard Rice, or LRE Water, used to be Leonard Rice, look at this and look at the engineering and some analysis. And what they found there was that, by drying up these fields in July and August, there's going to be a really big boost to those stream flows. And I'll get there in a minute, but upwards of a couple CFS. And then you'll start to see some of those return flow impacts. But what they also found was that there's not a lot of irrigation in September and October. So even though there might be some impacts in those later seasons, the rest of the irrigation season isn't really impacted for those downstream irrigators, because they're just typically not even diverting at that time. The stream flows are so low. So that really helped. That helped us understand that the impacts from this larger program would be minimal, and that there's some good opportunities there to help the streams. Let me go to just this table, which will show some of the impacts. So this is the net effect from the full season irrigation versus what's being proposed, which is the partial season irrigation. So they would irrigate for the first half of the year. Starting July 1st, they would stop irrigation. So you'll see there that there's about 4.5 CFS added to the stream in July, about 2 CFS added in August. And then you start to see some of the impacts. So September was just negative 0.07 of a CFS, so pretty minimal. And then in October, negative, you'll see an impact of negative 0.4 CFS. What they also found was that the natural flows in October start to come above those in-stream flows already. And so there wasn't a lot of concern that they had of impact to the in-stream flows in October, that they usually rebound because irrigation has completely ceased by then, is my assumption from what they were saying. So again, just kind of shows out what it looks like, but we're not really seeing a lot of impacts or any real impacts to the downstream irrigators. See some opportunities to help the stream. There was one other consideration in this, that we wanted to be able to talk about too. In early discussions with the applicants, they had talked about wanting to tie this program or with another similar program that the CWCB offers, which is a in-stream short-term lease. And which would be kind of similar in the sense that the CWCB would do a program like this. It's a 5 out of 10-year program as well. And that they could essentially provide either have the CWCB take over for those really dry years, or potentially in the future, let this program be able to operate a program under the Water Conservation Program for 5 years, and maybe under the CWCB in-stream flow lease for a few more years, even up to the full 10. So I know the applicants are still thinking about that. They have not applied to the CWCB for that in-stream flow lease. That idea was a little bit, it's a new idea and a new concept, and it's something that we stress some concern about, that we just needed to have a full discussion about that. I don't intend to have that discussion today. Our recommendation for the board to consider is just an approval for 1 year for this next year to operate the program. And we can see if there is, it provides an opportunity for downstream water users to let us know if there are concerns, or if they feel like there is injury that we need to look into more before approving a longer term program. And also if this program if they do proceed to work with the CWCB as well and want to kind of stack these two programs together, turning two temporary programs into kind of a permanent program, this would be, we would need to really talk with them, and this would need to come back before the board for that discussion. So that's a really brief rundown. We also have Tony LaGreca here from the Colorado Water Trust, and Angela Schenk from LRE Water, so that are available to answer any questions today as well.
Thanks, Brendan. Director Dennison and Director Haas.
And to be clear, the request is just for the enrollment in the project or the program to avoid historic consumptive use diminishment.
Correct. That's
the 1319 protections.
Absolutely. So basically, it will protect them from a future historical consumptive use analysis. It'll be like some notes in division records saying they participated in this program this year. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm just curious if 1 year is enough to tell us anything, to give us any input for next year. I mean, does it not make sense to do 2 years to see? Because 1 year these days can look nothing like the next year. I'm just curious if you all thought that through.
I did. I wanted just to be careful with the CWCB process as well. If the applicants decide to move forward on that, that we had time to look at that before approving multiple years that could overlap with potential CWCB approval. So that was the thought, but it's up to you guys.
Munger and
So Brendan, I read through most of it too, so I did, since it's in my county, I guess, but so one thing I noticed, it was originally filed, the water rights were in Moffat County, and then the second ones were all in Robb County. And so was that when the county was split? And so the original application was in Moffat County that you had in the fact packet. So, and again, I don't really care, but anyhow, I just wanted to point that out. So, my second question is, you noted in your thing that, I'm still wondering whether there's water there even. I mean, you noted in your thing that these water rights get called out by seniors on down the, whether it's down Slater Creek or whether it's on the Little Snake. So I'm just curious, is there water there to be had that they wouldn't have to already be releasing and not taking anyhow because of being junior to a senior call? That's not our problem. I mean, so we're approving it, and that's private deal between them and whoever they buying water, but anyhow, so.
Because I think the option is you can operate at 5 out of 10 years. I think in extremely dry years, this program wouldn't be benefited, as you said, because they would already be called out. Whatever water they would divert would be in the stream. So I think our idea is in moderately dry to kind of on the closer to average years, that this would provide a lot of benefit to the creek.
Okay, thank you. I
in years that they
appreciate
wouldn't
that.
be called out.
Brendan, I think the 1 year trial period is a really good way to go on this. I have significant concerns about this operating within this program and then also CWCB's in-stream flow and going over that 5/10 years. And I do know that, you know, I understand that things are very different between basins, but in the Upper Gunnison, when there is a call downstream water right holder, in a dry year, that typically that call gets taken off within 3 days because the benefit of that return flow is not there anymore in terms of the timing. And so I do think just kind of looking at what happens for the first years or for 1 year is a good idea.
Sonia, I think that's a great idea. One thing I want to clarify on the request of the board is we want to do this for 1 year. Generally, the district's approval pursuant to our district policy has been delegated to staff. We brought this one back to the board because it's a pretty large program, large in acreage and acre feet of water. Unless there is some concern from downstream irrigators or some other issue that arises, and one of those issues may be the CWCB stacking, if you will, of these programs, we would intend to address this at the staff level in the future, unless there's a problem. And I just want to be clear with the board that we don't intend to bring this back to you unless you direct us to do that, number one, or there's one of those issues that is unusual. The stacking of these two programs, our district is along with some other districts are largely responsible for the 5 and 10 year limitations in both of those programs. So I will say it set off some alarm bells in my head when the proposal came through to stack the two programs. And the reason, if you look back at why our board has pushed for the 5 and 10 year limitation, is that what we're really interested in, at least that's my understanding, to be corrected by the board if you think I'm off, is that what we're interested in is making sure that we're not encouraging or participating in the permanent drying up of agriculture, right? That we continue to keep our agricultural lands in productivity, and therefore, while we understand the benefit of enrolling in a program like this for some period of time, we don't want it to be long-term that would then result in the complete disappearance of that agricultural land. In this instance, I think it's important to recognize that this is a partial season fallow. So the land will still be irrigated. And in fact, in dry years, it's irrigated for as long as it's ever going to be, because there just isn't going to be the water availability anyway. It's in those moderate dry to moderate wet years where this program would actually kick in. And same thing with the CWCB's in-stream flow. But because there is a continual irrigation occurring, that partial season irrigation, at least from a staff perspective, we think that this may be, it may make sense to see if this stacking works. At the same time, we're concerned, and we wanted to bring that issue up, even though technically they're not applying, they're not moving forward or haven't yet moved forward with that. I wanted to flag that issue for you as one that we flagged, one that we're aware of, and one that we're trying to figure out, does our district's ideas behind that limitation of time apply to partial season fallowing programs the way it would if it was an entire season fallow? Just throwing that out there for discussion.
I think you guys made a great recommendation, and let's see whether there's any harm to other users and what it looks like. I do have concerns, as Sonia said, about the stacking together, because all of us who've been around the water world when all these loan programs were initiated, the number of years in a row was always key. So just to be able to kind of in run and say, yeah, we got two parcels and we're just gonna roll them together, seems problematic to me.
Okay, we have our request for action is to approve a water conservation program requested by Slater Park Land and Livestock LLC for partial year fallowing on approximately 680 acres in Slater Creek Basin tributary to the Little Snake for 1 year through 2024 irrigation season. We have a motion,
So Munger moves staff recommendation.
moved by Munger, second by Gray, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion approved. How are we doing? You need a break? Yep. Take it. I'll be back at 3:50. We're in the home stretch here, and we are on the general manager's report number F. 24 USGS joint funding agreement.
Dave Kanzer is here and he would like to take the rest of the afternoon to discuss it. But he is going to assume that A, you've read the memo and it's gonna give you a high level review along with the request.
Indeed, so page 369 PDF, got my memo there, which we just heard you've read carefully, and it's really for the new directors. But I think even the new directors are familiar with this program, which is one of my favorites and one of the biggest that the River District has in terms of single budget items. This year, the program has grown in gross numbers over $1 million for the first time. This covers all 15 counties. We're collecting water quantity and quality, and basically cooperating with USGS via a joint funding agreement to implement these activities and leveraging a whole bunch of stakeholder groups across the basin. And the reason it's one of my favorites is we look at these data all the time. And it is, I think, a successful cooperative program that really touches every stakeholder in the River District. We've got substantial investments from our partners to offset some of our costs. And today I'll be asking you for authorization to delegate authority to the general manager to sign this joint funding agreement. The gross obligation on what we call the customer side is about $735,000. So of that $1 million, about 30% is being provided by the federal government. And of that $735,000 that we would obligate, or should you go forward, we're offsetting that to the tune of about $145,000 from our stakeholders. So that really our net financial obligation, as it shows there at the top of the memo, is $590,000. And there is a table at the end that kind of shows where the priorities are and where most of the monies are. It's a little bit obtuse. I'm happy to walk through it or talk this through with folks either offline or now if you got questions. But again, you'll see kind of the program divided up into quality and quantity. Just to reinforce, about 2/3 now is supporting water quality throughout the basin, throughout the district, excuse me, and about 1/3 to support about 23 continuous stream flow measurement gauges. Here in Glenwood, we have some of the most sophisticated continuous monitors and a lot of data being collected right here. Just as an example, you're talking to director from Garfield County. We're looking at the impacts of agriculture, geothermal natural sources, geological inputs, as well as sort of anthropomorphic inputs like water treatment. So one other thing to just bring your attention to, remind you, not only are we doing those sort of classical quality quantity, we are expanding into wildfire impacts. At the end of the memo, talks about, soil moisture monitoring and meteorological data collection. whether it's a short term in response to wildfire to try to figure out and use for models that can predict impacts to the watershed, or again, longer term trend monitoring, how are things changing or staying the same. So with that, I would just open it up for discussion as necessary. And again, one of my favorite topics, I could talk your ear off, as Andy said, on any of these basins or any of these topics. It's fascinating stuff from my geo geek mind.
Fellow water nerd, I agree with Dave. In the White River Basin, we use the heck out of this data coming in. We're using it right now to do that return flow analysis. Algae, fish food, I can't forget to say that during the board meeting. The fish food, because we're looking for loading, and we're actually finding loading. You know, where there's increase in phosphorus in that river system. But even on down, further down for the town of Rangeley that they use for their federal permitting for their wastewater plant, for their drinking water supplies, for the reservoir project. I mean, there's long-term data at some of these sites of 30+ years. But not only that, but you got stream flow data. So it's really improved the modeling that we have within the White River Basin. And I strongly support this program. It's not saying it has not been contested within the White River Basin and tested, but yet they're still at the table funding it. So to me, that shows a testament for the program and those within the town of Rangeley that come forward to fight for this program to be funded through their annual budgets.
No, I just wanted to also express my appreciation for the River District for continuing to support some stream gauges in the Upper Gunnison Basin, which are really valuable and gonna be even more valuable. I think as we move forward, to probably having some TMDLs implemented in the basin within the next, starting in about 5 years. So I did have one question though. DK, are you familiar with the Interstate Council on Water Policy? I got something from them through John. Basically, they're writing and trying to lobby the federal government to increase USGS's cooperative match program. And just would really want to ask that the River District, participate and make this a priority, because for years, we have not seen increases in USGS's funding, and it has impacts. And so I think if we can lobby to get additional funding or have their funding increase for the benefit of our basin, that would be great.
Yeah, we've been looking at that as well and hearing about it. I don't know if it's Peter Evans is still the head of that, but he was the former CWCB executive director way back. I think he's probably retired, but that agency, I don't know, Zane, if you got any comments, but there's two sources of federal funds. One is the Cooperative Water Program, and one you'll see in my attachments called the Federal Priority Stream System. Both of those have been flat, but they are kind of on the track to be bumped up. And I think we could support those easily. And again, I don't know if you've got any comments or.
No comments other than we need to find the appropriate vehicle. But I'm happy to explore it with you.
I'll forward you this email that I have. I have the executive director as well, Callaway.
Okay,
now.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Just more of a question, does this open the door for adding more gauges, or is this the?
This is the annual program for the next 12 months.
This is it?
It's pretty much set. We do, as the memo says, every year have a sit down with our partners and with USGS to try to prioritize. If there's something that you see, we should discuss that now for next year, for 2024,
That's kinda where I was going.
2025. Every year we're in.
The next one.
Yeah.
All right, the requested action from staff is on the top of page 369. If we have a motion to approve staff request.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vandenbrink, second by Richard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you so
If I
much.
can, while DK is still here, DK and frankly, the USGS have offered to come talk to the board and explain the program and the benefits of the program. To the extent that they're not here today, you can blame me. Just looking at our agenda, I felt like it was a little too full. But if it is the desire of the board to kind of do a deeper dive on this at some point over the next year, we will try to get that on the board agenda. It is your agenda, not mine. I sometimes play that gatekeeper function for you to try to keep the meetings reasonable in length, but this has always been a huge financial commitment from the district. If you look at kind of where we spend our money, I think it's money well spent. I remember being shocked when I first got on the board back in 2006. I think it is a great program, but want to make sure the board understands it and has the opportunity to hear directly from USGS.
Great.
You're
A lot of head nodding.
Okay, all right, thank
We'll
you.
have more questions at dinner.
All right. Is Amy Moyer? There we go. The 2024 Urban Landscape Transformation Task Force update. In case anybody thought that the Colorado River Drought Task Force had a monopoly on really exciting discussions.
That's true. We have another task force that has been in the shadow of the drought task force. So in January of 2023, Governor Polis announced the Urban Landscape Conservation Task Force. It's also implemented a recommendation out of the 2023 water plan. We were appointed a seat. I held that, and then Rebecca Breezemore sat in for me while I was out on family leave. That process is just wrapping up with its final report expected to be released this month. It's undergoing a final review under the executive branch. But the goal of the task force was to advance urban outdoor water conservation and develop a set of recommendations. So I've listed that the report is pending the final review from the executive branch. All of the meetings were public, so we don't expect any changes to the recommendations. But the task force reached consensus on 10. They largely surround conversations that the task force had on turf replacement in both new and existing development, and rethinking outdoor landscapes in the context to include more native and climate appropriate vegetation. There's also in your memo a substantial list of areas that the task force identified that needs additional research and analysis as conversations about turf removal and landscape transformation progress. That there's a lot of unknowns, there's still more data needs to be learned in this topic. And one recommendation in particular that the River District supported the drafting was looking at the statewide collaboration and looking at how conserved consumptive use from landscape transformation can not only support water management from a growth perspective, but that we can look at creative arrangements with that conserved consumptive use. It aligns with a recommendation that the district made in our comments to the water plan, that entities have a better connection with their source water and a better connection of those impacts when your source water is many miles away from where it's eventually used in the service area. So overall, I think the task force included a broad range of expertise across the state, included a broad range of focus areas of a lot of people that work day in and day out on turf replacement programs on the Front Range, then also a lot of voices across the state. So I think this is especially important. I'm sure you'll hear from Zane on some additional legislation that's in the works that's looking at landscape transformation. I did just want to add, we have our community funding partnership that can provide support to communities looking to make these transformations. We have made some funding awards to that in the past, and to the extent legislation continues to progress, that can be a resource to communities as well. So I will keep this pretty quick and simple, and Rebecca and I are happy to answer any questions on that process.
Questions?
So I know that there were a lot of discussions on quote climate appropriate. Obviously, that's very important to Mason County, because Mason County, for example, has the highest temperatures, I think, Grand Junction, any city in the country. We also have very senior water rights. And the green fields obviously are critical, not only for the humidity and for the temperature there, but also for the winds that come in out of the desert and so on. And a good example of what Grand Junction would look like in my opinion, if you took the entire turf and green fields on, it's very easy to see by simply looking north of the interstate versus south of the interstate. So I'm wondering to what extent that was really discussed. Now, we were surprised by the appointment of City of Grand Junction. But I can tell you, I've had several comments. They're not really keeping up to speed with this. I kind of wanted to know if there was particular discussion to desert settings. For some opinions are, hey, you're in the desert, you shouldn't be there in the first place. It's just the opinion, we have the water. It's critical for our environment, our climate, at that high desert situation. Just some comments you might have in there.
Yeah, thank you, Director McGinnis. I think that's a great point. And I will say in a lot of the discussions, there was an acknowledgement of the different elevations and different plant types that would be appropriate across Colorado. And to the extent there were conversations about developing a statewide methodology, there was always the caveat that there needs to be ways to modify that for the appropriate local climate, local setting, and local decisions. But I'll turn it over to if there's anything to add in some of that context.
Yeah, I'll just second that. I think there really was a focus on locally driven solutions and definitely the understanding that one size does not fit all for Colorado communities. And I think to add on to that, there was a lot of conversations that creating rockscapes was not a solution to, getting rid of turf. It was more of the focus of, can we find native plants that still give us greenery, but maybe don't use as much water.
I might tell you, rockscapes in our area provide you a home similar to a microwave. And we need that moisture content. We've had it for a long time. We have a lot of rights. So keep in mind when you've been a part of your district, it's desert, it has good water rights. Anyway, I just want some thoughts on what you heard. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other comments? Thank you for your work.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Amy and Rebecca. Next up is our triennial salary survey. Audrey, be happy to walk us through that.
Yeah, well, in the interest of time, I'll try to provide an overview in preparation for the report that will be delivered in July. I wanted to provide some background, some context, answer any questions as we head into this process. So yes, 2024 is the year for the triennial salary survey. We've been conducting those since 2000, every 3 years. As I mentioned, we'll provide, or the goal at least, is to provide the report for board review and action in July. I did send out an RFP to 14 consultants in mid-November, and I did receive 4 proposals by the January 2nd deadline. So I feel pretty good about the proposals that we received. We're in the process of reviewing those right now. The price is in the $30,000 to $40,000 range, just as a heads up, but that will be within general manager authority for that contract approval. And Andy and I will be interviewing. My goal is to just interview 2 of those consultants just to make sure that we are clear on what our goals and expectations are for the process, and to make sure that we're comfortable with the consultants' ability to provide services to meet those goals. And those goals are, 1, to review our current salary ranges that we have established, make sure that they are in line with our competitive market, and then also just to give us a good gut check on our compensation philosophy and practices that we have. There's no perfect way for compensation and salary administration. And so we just want to have an opportunity to discuss with them and see if there's any ideas for ways that we can improve that process. So as some background, under Eric Kuhn's leadership in the late 1990s, the board developed this compensation philosophy, recognizing that we want to be an attractive and competitive employer, and we want to be a slight pay leader. And so what that means is that we are targeting the midpoint of our salary range is at 65th percentile, which is, I kind of laugh. It's like, that's such an Eric Kuhn thing to come up with. But what that means is if you had 20 employers, in the room with 20 of the same positions, we would pay more than 13 and less than 7. And so that's really the target that we're looking for the midpoint of our salary ranges. And so I just want to make sure that people understand that's the salary structure. Individual salaries will fall somewhere within that range, kind of depending on tenure, years of experience, where they were hired on, performance, et cetera. And so in between every 3 years from when we do the salary survey, we do make adjustments to the salary structures based on data from Employers Council. And so this is good check to make sure that those annual adjustments have kind of kept pace with market. There's also some times where some positions are more in demand or have faster wage growth than others. And so this is just an opportunity for us to check those. So in the salary survey, we're going to have 28 positions that will be surveyed. You may know that we only have 25 employees, but we do include some other positions for planning purposes. And new this year, we're also going to ask that they look at board member compensation as well as board officer salaries. So that was a request, and we're happy to include that in the questionnaire of the other agencies, of course, those that have boards. So we're in the process of reviewing and updating position descriptions to make sure those are accurate. And then we'll work with the consultant to do two components of the salary survey. The first is to survey 25 to 50 of our target employers. We aim to have consistency in those employers that have participated in the past. It's a variety of entities, water conservancy districts, municipalities, counties, federal, state entities as well are all included in that custom survey. And then we also look at published data. So there's a variety of surveys out there that have, much larger participation. And so we weigh 50% of the custom survey and 50% of the published survey to come up with that data point that we use. And so then we compare the target to what we have in our current ranges, and we may make adjustments if it falls outside of a 5% kind of threshold on either end of the target. The board's positions that they are in charge of is the general manager and general counsel. And so you all will be presented that data and have the discretion to make adjustments based on the survey data. We had some recent discussions about, the data is a tool for us to provide kind of objective decisions on our salaries. But it's up to the board's discretion as to what you do with that information. And then the rest of the positions fall within general manager and general counsel authority. So we also sometimes make adjustments to individual salaries to be in line with the survey data. If they fall, if an adjustment is warranted to the range, we oftentimes make adjustments to the individual salary as well to bring them along with the market. We did include a pretty large salary survey contingency budget, just recognizing that the survey was coming up. We've had a lot of new folks or new positions really that were established, and we use data to create those salary ranges at the time of hire or development, but oftentimes, there may be an adjustment that's warranted. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I know it's really complicated, and we'll get into more of the details in the presentation in July, but wanted to just kind of tee this up for the board's discussion and just know that it's coming.
Audrey, did you look at total compensation or salary only?
So this study looks at salary only. One of the things, and we've talked about, benefits a lot in the past, and some of it, is difficult. One, for, the cost of insurance within our region is much more expensive than maybe what would be in Montrose or in Denver. And then there's also the details of health benefit plans that get really complicated to try to compare. And so it's not apples to apples a lot of times. So it is something though that I do look at survey data, to see retirement plans or paid time off or things like that. So we do look at that, but it is not included in this. This is strictly salaries.
Thank you. Other questions, Director Chavez?
Audrey, this last year, the Upper Gunnison utilized Employers Council, and this is the first year that they're transitioning to this new database. Have they talked to you about that?
Yes, they have.
The results are really mixed, because the other one that they used to allowed us to base pay on geographic area, which was something that my board wanted. With this new database, I was finding that I would see cuts of 17% in salary or an increase of 25%. So I think the custom survey will be a good it's good that that's happening now and that you don't have to use employers council this year. So,
Yeah, there's been a number of things with Employers Council. I think it is a helpful tool, that pay factors database for, maybe spot checking, but it's not the custom survey is really a great opportunity for us to really look at our competitive employers. And some of them, like I said, are water entities specific to, like Denver Water, that we're really at the table with negotiating with, recognizing they're, a much larger, they have a utility branch when we look at the positions that are comparable. But yeah, the custom survey, I think, really helps us get to that more accurate data.
and I think recognizing if we, the River District had to go out to seek or hire another employee, looking at those organizations, probably people that worked for them and what their pay is, because that's what you'd have to compete with. Thank you.
Just say, our frustration level with Employers Council is really high. We had to go through the process, and I say we, Audrey had to go through the process because they failed to produce their annual salary survey data anywhere close to the time that they normally do. And so when it came time to our last salary adjustment, what is the pool for salary, merit increases? It was rough, and so I think we're finding Employers Council to be very unreliable.
Good questions, comments. Thank you for the heads up.
Yeah.
I have just one, you're gonna survey the board as well?
Yeah, so we're going to include in the questionnaire board member compensation and also board officers. I will mention, though, that I do believe, and Peter and Andy can correct me if I'm wrong, that the compensation that is provided as a stipend for meeting expenses is set in the statute. And
That's what I
so
was
if
wondering too.
but I don't.
Maybe hold us harmless in case we're paid too much.
For your volunteer time. But yeah, I think it's another data point just to see, and I think if we wanted to make any changes, we would have to go to revise the statute.
That's true with our board member meeting stipend. It is set in statute. The board officer salaries are not set in statute. But we were asked to take a look at it, and we're happy to look at it. It's information for you and others to decide what you want to do. But if there's a good reason to seek approval from the legislature for additional compensation, that you could do that, or you could choose not to. But we want to give you the data at least.
Yeah, Doug, I'm the one that requested, whether or not others have requested, I don't know, but it is unique as we go through all of this. Our president, vice president, or chairman, or co-chairman are covered under that, not the board. And it's unique to this district in that specifically legislation that applies to us for some reason has that restriction. In my opinion, we ought to look at that, and we have an opportunity to let the board make that decision. Or if there are other options that we have. But in the meantime, I think the board, when we look to the future, if you're a county commissioner, a lot of people assume that's part of their duty, and you have the option as a commission, for example, not to take the salary. And you do, I think any of us have that particular option. But for the regular citizen out there, that's especially these efforts, I know you were just reviewing this packet. It takes a lot of time. I spend a full day before just going through the thing, and it's going to become more and more complicated. So those people that are not part of a governmental unit where they are reimbursed, and we as commissioner, when I was a commissioner, I used to feel sorry for the city council people. We were paid to be there all day, and the city council people got $100 a month or so. So I just wanted to get a sense of what's reasonable. And the most reasonable thing to me is allow that discretion to be debated here amongst our board and let us make that decision versus a cap. And we found that in the legislature, they put a cap on, and then people are too concerned, too worried about the rejection by the constituents who always think you're overpaid. And if it's an elected office, you're always corrupt. So it stays stagnant for a long period of time. When in fact, and actually Polis is the one that kind of broke loose from that tradition and raised a lot of panels across the state and what the oil and gas commissioners were being paid and the PUC and those kind of people. So I thought, hey, I'm not bashful about it. I want people that maybe can't afford to give us a full day of $100, which my dinner last night at the hotel, which was a all the stew and stuff. Now that's covered by our expenses, but $35 or something like that. So just so you know where it came from me, and I think we ought to take a look at it, and we ought to have the guts if we decide that there's some fairness or some benefit for us in the future on broadening our search for directors. We look for an opportunity in the legislature to go in there and make that change with parameters on it.
Thank you, Director Meekin.
Yeah, Madam Chair, also just recognizing the amount of time that your president, vice president, or executive committee puts into helping and the meetings that you're required to be at and everything. I do think, and I found with my board as well, that it's a significant amount of time that you are putting in. And I appreciate that. I want to recognize that as well.
Kathy may not want me to mention this, but as a county commissioner, Kathy has chosen not to take salary when she was vice president. So she saved the district tens of thousands of dollars in doing so. So we do
Dinner
appreciate it.
tonight.
Yeah, we'll buy you dinner.
Said Peter. It's somewhere in the dark recesses of my mind. I remember that in I think it was in 2007, and it was at the request of I believe either Southwestern or the Rio Grande Conservation Districts, the districts there's legislation to amend that provision to increase the amount from $75 a day to $100 a day. I think I floated the concept of why not just make it, at a rate set by the district up to something or whatever, and that was shot down for some reason. I think folks thought, that might not have flown for some reason or the other. Times have changed, obviously, but maybe Zane can track down that legislation and any history that went around.
And to your point, Scott, I know that a lot of city councils are looking at increased pay to broaden equity issues so that people can afford to come to meetings if they have a second job or something like that. Worth looking at. Sure. Thanks, Audrey.
Thank you, Audrey. And if Audrey can stay up and Amy can join, we are proposing a process to update our district strategic plan. Audrey and.
Sure. Yeah, so some of the directors were on the board when we went through the process of strategic planning in 2016. And then we adopted our current strategic plan in 2017. We've added one strategic initiative, but substantively, the strategic plan has not been updated since. And as you all know, a lot of things have happened in the last 7 years. Including, passing of 7A, the establishment of the community funding partnership, Shoshone permanency, the drought task force and other legislative efforts, the renegotiations coming up and of course, the significant drought that we are in and likely will continue to be in. And so, we talked about doing this effort last year. But I think there was some uncertainty and we really wanted to focus on some of the other initiatives. And while this is a time consuming and potentially difficult process, we really think that the time is right for us to work through this strategic plan update process. And so we're really looking for some input from the board today. But what we would propose is that there's some board level work through this and then also some staff level work. And so that's kind of why Amy and I are partnering on taking the lead on this. Of course, as the director of strategic partnerships, she has a lot of ideas and influence on the strategic direction of the River District. And then also, you know, on the internal side, we've had a lot of transition, new staff over the last few years, new priorities. And so really want to take this opportunity to do some of that staff level work, some of the culture, communication, the how and the why we do what we do. And so what we are proposing is that we, of course, work with a facilitator or a consultant, recognizing that is not something that staff has the time or really skill set to necessarily lead on. And so would like to have some input from the board today to develop a request for proposal to submit or to put out there for proposals from consultants. We have some ideas and have had some feedback from partners on consultants or firms to use with Westlow ties. We would do that in the February-March timeframe, bring that back to the board in April for discussion and review, that the board would be the one to make that final decision at probably at the recommendation of staff for that consultant. Then we would start with the staff retreat, and I think that that would be an appropriate place for us to kind of develop some of the ideas, some of the things for the board to respond to. And then we would anticipate that there would be a separate strategic planning workshop, recognizing that our quarterly meetings are already very full, take up a lot of time and brain power. And so want to set that as a separate meeting, but that's one of the pieces that I'd be interested in some feedback on what that strategic planning workshop might look like. And then, of course, we would work with the consultant and the staff to develop that strategic plan document. Some of the strategic initiatives that we have will certainly still apply, and then we'll have new ones that we'd like to present to the board. And likely that would be in kind of the January 2025 timeframe is what we think is a reasonable timeline to develop that document for your review. Do you have anything to add?
Oh, you covered it.
Director McGinnis and then Director Vandenberg.
I think it's a good idea, and I think it's very, very important, starting with the consultant and starting even with newer staff, that there be a clear understanding of the history of the district, what the purpose of it is. And I'll tell you what I hear from my agriculture community, they're deeply concerned that frankly, we're gonna abandon them, or the pressures certainly outside our basin are to, hey, we want to continue to build homes in St. George or in our own state in Aurora, Colorado. And they're not slowing down building homes over there, that we ought to be the sacrificial lamb. And you hear it from a lot of people, we ought to be sacrificial lamb for recreation on the river, that all of a sudden should be a priority. It's a very important industry that's developed over here. I just want to make sure that we go into this clear mind of history and the significant changes in the history or the historical purpose of this district that has been tried and tested for many, many years. One, have adaptability, it's critical, but also understand why it came about and what we have to protect. And of course, the good news is we've got what everybody wants. Bad news is we have what everybody wants. And they have all kinds of ideas how to help us out, including that presentation from Aurora about a year or two ago, how we ought to do this and how we ought to do that. I just think the history is going to be real critical. And I saw in the document that we had in our program some history I wasn't aware of, which is great. So I think it's off to a good start. I think it's great. Just make sure that the new folks in town, so to speak, or the outside consultants have a very clear understanding of where we've been and where we want to go, and where we've been helps a lot in where we want to go. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner McGinnis, just real quickly, I would agree with you. I just, for what it's worth, our staff will tell you that one of their first assignments upon being hired at the district is to read George Sibley's History of the River District that was published on our 75th anniversary. And so I agree with you that our history is important for all of us associated with the district. And certainly we intend to hire a consultant who can appreciate that.
And the mandate, I mean, the boards I've served on, primarily private boards, they send us off to school as board members for 2 or 3 days to kind of get an idea, so it should have been mandated reading for me as well. I should have read that document.
I didn't help you accomplish that.
I didn't look at it.
You may need caffeine.
In more than one day.
Director Barrett, and then Director House.
I think I kind of mentioned this a couple of times, maybe last year, so this is very timely. So I'm glad to see this come forward. As a matter of fact, I've recently talked to directors here on the River District saying, I think this needs to come to the forefront. We're there. It's been far too long, so I do believe that there needs to be additional director input, not just one opportunity. The directors need to kind of help drive this thing to give the overall goals that we see amongst our specific area of these waterways that we represent. So I know I have considerable thoughts that I'm eager to share and get 90% of them shot down. But that doesn't mean I don't have thoughts. But no, I'm glad to see this come forward. I think with some of the newer directors, I was here 10 years ago. And frankly, I was a nervous Nick sitting at the table because there was actually an opportunity that I appreciated that allowed me to share who I am with the directors that I work with. It helps me learn who they are as an individual as well. It made me expose some of my vulnerabilities, which is good, because we do work fairly closely, and I think we got a darn good board. And us learning each other's personalities is important for us to develop a strong strategic plan. So I'm not saying I'm gonna pour my heart on the table, but I think I would be willing to expose myself a little bit more to these directors in a setting to help develop a better plan for the district.
I'm not exposing myself.
Give me a break. I'll share mine.
It's like
Like I never share anything in here.
I know, we can't wait to see what's next.
You're gonna lead off, buddy.
Wrong time to show up.
Follow that.
Yeah, I know, right?
Sorry.
Well, first of all, I'm thrilled that we're doing this. It's, I think, so valuable, especially when you have a team that's changing, your board members that are changing. It's just really good to kind of refresh this every once in a while. Having done a few of these myself, the couple things that I think would be helpful that weren't in the first one or the last one is some level of prioritization. We have a lot of stuff in our strategic plan, and it's just, there's no differentiation between, is this the most critical thing versus, I mean, there's just, there's no relativity, and I think that would help as things get busier and busier. How do we make decisions? How do we prioritize? The other thing that I've noticed isn't here, and it's also hard for a governmental organization that's reacting a lot, is any kind of metrics. Like, how do we know if we've been effective? How do we gauge that over time? And again, often it's not on our pace, we're reacting, but I think it helps to give us those North Stars.
I will just say, I agree with you, the prioritization would be good. I was not on the board or on staff when this last version came through. But given the times where I've tried to prioritize and say, I don't think I can handle this new task, and being told by the board that you will handle this new task, I'm not sure that we'll reach an agreement on prioritization. I just want to warn you on that. I think there's a good idea, and I would appreciate it. I think our staff would appreciate it.
I don't think it's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4,
okay,
5, but
yeah.
like some sort of, here's the top tier things that we have to do as an organization. And here's kind of the things that we really should be doing, but we may not always be able to when you hold them up against those must-dos.
Right, I agree. And I would also say, with the board support, and part of why I really want to do this plan is something that you hit on that, and that I think 7A and our CFP has enabled us to get out of the reactive stance and move into a proactive stance on a lot of things, not everything, but on a lot of things. And I'd love for our strategic plan to reflect that a bit more. And that's where we're, not, completely understandably, it's not mentioned, it's not there. We need, it's a major effort in, here, and it allows us to lead on all of our other priorities by having that funding and that source. So
I would second the need for metrics. I think that's really helpful. Just a few of them on the biggest priority issues. It's pretty cool.
I think there's only about 3 or 4 of us here that were actually on the, or 5 of us here that were. You were? Okay, so there's about 6 of us. Okay. 10 years.
Right, great. Thank you for kicking this off. I think it'll be valuable for us.
Next item is our Colorado River Basin Roundtable member. The suggestion here is that Jason Turner thinks he's getting off the hook. Jason has served as president and our representative to the district for quite some time. Before that, we had Jim Pokrant, who many of you will remember was actually president of the Colorado River Basin Roundtable. I think it's great that we're able to provide or have provided Colorado River Basin with some executive leadership and support. I think it is something that we probably ought to get away from, however, because we don't do it in the other basins. And we need to be fair in how we're allocating our resources. I will say that Jim and Jason both have informed me, and I happen to know because I have had an office across the hall from Jason, just how much time that position can take. And so I appreciate Jason's being willing to do it. When we were suggesting and recommending that Brendan Langenhausen be appointed as our new representative, we are strongly discouraging Brendan from throwing his hat into the ring as president of the district and let somebody else, or the roundtable, let somebody else do that. We're not walking away from it, but we want to try to do a good job of treating our basins equally and fairly and with our support. And so Brendan has a long history on the roundtable, having been a consultant helping with the initial BIP. And having attended countless hours of those meetings, and yet he is still willing to do it. So we would ask that you follow staff's recommendation to appoint Brendan to that position. Brendan, do you want to say anything before they appoint him?
Oh, it'd be an honor to sit and be a representative on the board or on the roundtable. I think Jason has done a tremendous job as the chair. It's great. I think stepping down from being chair for the River District, being the chair though, also provides a great opportunity for other leaders to step up in the basin. The Colorado Basin really, this is a good time for more involvement and more participation from the roundtables. Yeah, it'd be an honor to be a representative for you.
Brendan, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Hazard moves, staff recommendation.
All right, we'll take a motion from Director Hazard, second from Director Haas. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Brendan, for taking that on.
Thanks, Brendan. Hopefully you'll look at back at this day as a positive.
If we could, I just, sorry to interject. I just wanted to thank Jason for the service to the roundtable and to the River District. Did spend a lot of time on that. I'll be happy to have some of that time back for our legal department. I think having, and I think this is consistent with what you just did, but having River District representation on the roundtable is obviously important. I think we would always be a resource and provide leadership to the roundtable, but we don't want to be, we don't want the roundtable to be some sort of tentacle of the River District either. So I think this is a good move.
Great. Thank you, Jason.
All right, if we could have Raquel, DK, and Amy come on up. You may have to bring one more chair up. This is the a discussion on the water conservation decision support tool down in the Agre. And please, I think our board has read the memo, so if we could fairly quick, I don't think there's an action item associated with this, just a summary and discussion to the extent the board would like.
Sure, there is no action item, and we are anticipating spending more time with the board in April on the water conservation and decision support tool. But did want to provide a quick status update. So I'm going to quickly kick things off and then turn it over to Raquel and BK, who have been integral partners on this project, and it's been a really nice cross-discipline project that we've gotten to work on together. But just a quick reminder to set the stage. River District staff have been working with our contractor, the Freshwater Trust, to build a decision support tool with the intended use to help guide the future implementation and look at future water conservation programs. This is cooperatively funded between the River District and the CWCB through their local capacity grant program. And just to reorient the board, since we haven't talked about this in a bit, staff first began looking at this opportunity after Commissioner Tootin made her announcement calling for the conservation of an additional 2 to 4 million acre feet of water. The landscape has changed quite a bit since that announcement, but there's been the convergence of multiple factors since then. We've had multiple federal pieces of legislation that have provided funding. We've had the reauthorization of the System Conservation Pilot Program. So this project is really premised on the notion that we can look at a data-driven approach to conservation programs to look at how to best leverage and how to maximize any potential conservation savings with benefits to farmers and ranchers, added benefits to stream flows while minimizing any adverse economic impacts. And so as of last June, we partnered with the Uncompahgre Valley Water Users Association to help develop this pilot tool. It's a multi-objective decision support tool focused within their service area as a pilot. So I'm going to turn it over to Raquel and DK to walk you through some additional stakeholder feedback that we set up with local producers in that area and where we've taken the project so far, but it is on track to be completed as of this March.
Thanks, Amy. And so in addition to outreach with multiple entities such as the CWCB, the Bureau, and nonprofits, we engaged water users and ag producers through technical advisory committee meetings. We had a total of 3 of those meetings, and the intent of them was to provide project updates, to listen and to gather feedback, as well as collect technical insights to better inform the tool that is being developed. Originally the intent of the tool was to also have these pilot water conservation projects happen locally in the Uncompahgre Valley. But securing additional federal funding for these pilot water conservation activities has been challenging and slow. And so still the tool is really powerful, and as an example of how we can use it, we plan to do a case study using the tool to evaluate 2024 SCPP applications and how the potential impacts economically, locally of the applications from the most recent SCPP round. We can also use the tool to compare different scenarios and different trade-offs depending on the scenarios. As Amy mentioned, the plan is to come back to the board in April to demo the tool and present the tool to gather feedback from the board, input and input on how to move forward with this project. And in the meantime, we are exploring a few next steps. The first one is identifying funding opportunities to improve this decision support tool by incorporating system level infrastructure upgrades. That has been a really big flag and point of discussion with the technical advisory committee meetings. Also incorporating in the tool evaluation of emerging water conservation practices such as split season irrigation. The second thing we're exploring is continuing to look at federal funding opportunities and interest to implement these localized water conservation pilot activities and to install additional measuring devices so that things can be monitored and also any water conservation can be accounted for within the system. Third, this tool is, as good as data that goes into the tool. And so one thing that we're continuing to explore is updating and expanding the input data that is feeding the tool. And lastly, expanding the DST, the decision support tool, to other areas. Right now, it's solely focused on the Uncompahgre Valley. You guys want to add anything? If there are questions, we're happy to answer.
Yeah, Director Dennison?
I'm glad you brought up the data. What data does inform the tool? I mean, do you start off with how much water is coming into the Uncompahgre and what the total consumptive use is, and that's your starting point? And like, does the Division 4 spreadsheet inform that in any way? Or are you using just the South Canal and a bunch of stream gauges, or how you doing that?
So for a lot of state data is used for the tool in terms of consumptive use, and also OpenET is used on a more field level data because that data is not available. But the tool also looks at water quality and economics and all of that. And some of it is the Freshwater Trust, who is our contractor on this, has some models on water quality. So for sediment and phosphorus and nitrogen, it's based on their specific model. And selenium, it's, we had some data in combination with the USGS that feeds into it. Crop type, it's the NRCS, and all of that has been QA'd with Uncompahgre Valley Water Users Association data as well. They annually have these surveys on water consumption and crop type, and it's matching up, so that's a good thing. But
Yeah, I would just point out, it's not a real-time tool. It's based on historical data. Hydrobase is the main source, which is the state's database. The crop data is a combination of NRCS, state, and anything we can get our hands on. But essentially, it's a GIS framework which overlays all these important parameters and then adds, as you just heard, other models. So in addition to state mod, which is the water rights allocation piece, it adds an economic model and also this water quality model. And so there's really a series of these models with a visualization tool and integrates these things and spits out a bunch of the things that we care about. Economics, what they call uplift. So what is the benefit to doing these practices on water quality? What are the benefits for conservation if you fallow X number of acres? And so it's a relative analysis tool. It's not an absolute analysis tool, keep that in mind. And it's based on historical data. You heard about OpenET. That's really the really important piece. It's another model that is now being used by the basin states to evaluate consumptive use. And so that's only available since 2016.
Mhm.
And so that's a complicating factor, but also a benefit. So you basically have results from 2016 forward, and then backwards, you're relying on state mod, which I think you're familiar with, is not the best tool to look at consumption and return flows, right? So we're gonna probably focus on the more recent data, which generally speaking is always better than the older historical data, but that's what this is. So we wanna manage expectations that we're not selling a bill of goods that's gonna give you the absolute result. It's gonna be a trade-off tool, relatively analyzing different approaches, different number of acreage, fallow techniques in different places of the Uncompahgre only, right? So hopefully that, I can see you're skeptical.
Yep. But not just fallowing, operations too, or upgrade, system upgrades, you mentioned, infrastructure.
Down the road.
Right, so you could model that or plug that in and compare it to past years' operations perhaps and check, like, for instance, say, okay, well, here's what's happening at the Sunshine Drain today, or Cummins Gulch or Buttermilk, whatever, and say, here's what could happen if this occurred.
So again, want to manage the expectations. It's not that well resolved, but there are some critical points where we can look at and try to calibrate or verify some of those points you just mentioned, because those are critical outflow points. But it's not designed to say, okay, here was the load in 2016 and now here's the load in under these different approaches. But it would show, okay, again, on the fallow side, because it's really a fallow analysis right now. We want to introduce rotational, crop swap, other things down the road. We're just starting pretty simple. And you do a scenario which would identify these fields being fallowed. And because we have now applications in the Uncompahgre Valley, we can really look at that in a very specific way. Otherwise, we're either randomly picking, X% fallow, right? What would the impacts be? Or now we have a real life case study that we can look at, which again, managing expectations would just be for today versus this other scenario tomorrow.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you measure operational spills in regards to the number of acres that are followed?
So I'm just gonna jump in, you guys. So the return flow question is a really important issue to Uncompahgre. They've told us that if you fallow too much in this area, it's gonna limit our ability to serve. And so using their general manager, Steve Pope, said, we wanna limit this area as an example, because we know we can't get water past it if there's not enough push water. So, but to get to your specific question, we're not measuring outflows, we're modeling everything we're talking about. And we're relying on, again, state mod and using their efficiency that's built into the model to look at the differences and what might be available in different systems, those main head gates.
So are you gonna be, so the ditch riders and all will have to be giving you data. And there's areas like the Ironstone and those areas down there that the Ironstone literally goes dry in the middle of the system because there's not enough water there if we don't have return flows. And the system won't work.
Yep, no, you're right on. We recognize that, they recognize it. The ditch riders and the water masters are part of this technical advisory committee, providing those inputs, saying this is not gonna work, don't do this, don't analyze it because it makes no sense. So we're really trying to limit the analysis to what makes sense. It still may come out later that they say, no, that's too much, or no, we can have, there's more capacity to do that in the Ironstone. But keep in mind, this is looking at historical data, and it's only as resolved as the historical data is available. We're not going out and measuring yet today real-time information in those spills, right? If it's not available in the record, we can't analyze it, and that's a weakness. We recognize that.
I think operational spills are, the guy that's sitting in that office needs to know what those operational skills are. What flows are there.
Let me just add, so this is a planning level study, right? It's not an operational study, but we do need to limit the planning study based on the reasonable operational assumptions.
Their comments.
So is there an ask for us here?
No.
Just an update?
No, this is just a brief status update, and I think we realize it's hard to comprehend what this looks like. So we are planning to come back to the board with more of a fully informed suggestion to receive board impact on feedback, especially once you've had an opportunity to see the tool, because it is such so much in a geospatial context. It's really helpful to walk through. So we wanted to give just a quick update to the board that things are progressing. We're starting to think through what potential next steps would be, but we're expecting to take more feedback in April with the board.
Great.
So given Director Catlin's questions, and he's very familiar with the area, it's a planning study, but it's or planning tool, but it's not operational. But when you do planning, it's because you're anticipating operations. So I think we got to go, for me, I need to hear more information, go really slow, that we don't violate some of our policies or strategic plans on what we've said on the ground application that we're gonna kind of draw the line at. I guess that's it.
And the other thing, I guess, just thinking outside the box here a little bit, every river system will have about 30 of these different ones based on the terrain and the hydro and the water flow and the rest. And what will work in Uncompahgre won't work in some of the other basins. I mean, and what works in the middle of the Yampa won't work at the top of the Yampa or the bottom of the Yampa. So this will be but anyhow, that's what you guys are heading toward. We come up with this scheme and steady, and then we can replicate the thing on our per system part of the basis, I assume.
If I can, I mean, I think our concern, I want to make sure you understand why we're talking about this, is these conserved consumptive use programs that are being pushed by the Bureau, the UCRC, the state at times. Our concern is that the level of understanding of our different irrigation schemes, the geography, the river flows, the hydrology, and the lack of willingness to understand that and consider its impacts on our various areas within our district could cause really significant harm. And so when we initially started this effort, it was, how do we develop the data in a tool to help our irrigators determine how, if these programs are going to be out there. We're not in support of the programs. We're not doing it because, and you'll remember the board, when they authorized this contract with Freshwater Trust, it's not an endorsement of the conserved consumptive use program. It's, how do you do this intelligently? Because our fear is that the programs that have been rolled out or discussed really have paid very little attention to the local economic output and the social impacts, as well as the hydrologic impacts on widespread fallow for pay programs. And so this isn't the district trying to enable those kind of programs. This is the district trying to help develop data and a tool so that our local operators can make intelligent decisions when it comes to the design and the participation in these programs. And there's every indication that these programs are going to continue, whether this district likes it or not. So how do you give the tools to our producers and the operators of these systems to be able to do it in the best way possible to protect our water users in our communities? And that's really where I think we're shooting. This is the beginning of a long effort. Okay, so this is not, this tool is, as you can hear, trying to collect that data, the sources of data, the information in a way that makes sense. One of the things that, from an operational perspective, that will come out in the Uncompahgre and the folks at the Uncompahgre today and the prior managers of the Uncompahgre system know, is that it's not designed to handle this kind of fallowing. And it's going to be really interesting to see several of the applicants in today's SCPP program, the 2024 program, there's chunks of large acreage in the Uncompahgre system. I'm going to be very interested to see what the impact on their neighbors and on the system is from participating in this.
Unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And Director Dennison.
To that end, and those are, appreciate the comments, Andy. Will the data that was gathered from the previous SCPP projects, the Uncompahgre, be taken into this? Is that data that's being used? Have we reached out to those producers? Because there have been a number, and none of them have been fallow projects. They're all crop switching or deficit irrigation or.
Yeah, I would say, if I might, the data that I think you're talking about was not collected. The data that we're looking at, economic impacts, water quality, benefits, water produced, that's the only piece that those lessons learned that you were very well, very close to that. So maybe you got something else in mind?
Yeah, no, there's economic data, at least on the last ones, about crops produced per acre foot, savings, the bottom line for the producer. And to some degree, the relationship with the seed provider and, kind of how that shook out throughout the year and.
You talking about the reclamation report?
No, not the reclamation report, just the information from I think it's the most recent SCPP project. I'm just wondering if you're reaching out to those producers to find out about how it impacted them or if that's gonna feed into this.
I think it's a good point you're raising, but I would say no, we're not doing that per se. There probably are some producers that were interested in doing some things that are on our TAC or Technical Advisory Committee. But in terms of specific data collected and reported, the only one I'm familiar with is the reclamation report, but maybe you've got some other econ data that would be helpful. We'd love to see it.
And for 2023, the participation in the Uncompahgre was pretty slim.
Yeah, no, you're talking about 2018 and
2018.
Oh, I see.
yeah, those 2 or 3 years. And those were research projects that CSU did a bunch of work on. Again, you were involved. I never saw reports that encapsulated local community impacts, whether it's and maybe some of the data you're talking about is protected at the grower level.
Yeah.
And if you can get those folks to come forward, we'd love to have that. That'd be a rich data set to add.
All right, any other questions for Raquel? So you'll be back in April. Part 2.
Part 2.
Thank you very much. It is about 5:05. We have dinner scheduled for 6. Would the board be willing to move items L, M, and manager report to first thing in the morning?
I'll make a motion.
We don't need a motion.
Yes.
All right.
take it as I-
All right, thank you. So we have a few minutes to get back to the hotel or do whatever you need to do, and want to tell them where the.
If I can just help you orient you a little bit, the hotel is Hotel Denver, for those of you who have not checked in. We did that so that you can easily walk. For those who haven't checked in there yet, there is a parking lot to the east off of Blake Street. This is Cooper Street here. Blake is the next one over. There's a parking lot that's gated. You go in there, you will get your that parking validation, so you can park in that lot. The hotel faces the Amtrak station, Hotel Denver. You can walk from the Hotel Denver to dinner, which is at Brava, which is at 809 Grand Avenue. It is so just past 8th Street on the right-hand side if you're walking up Grand Avenue away from the river. It is downstairs in the basement of this building,
So which side of Grand is it on?
It's on the west side of Grand. It's on the other side of Grand from where we are. We've eaten there before. It's an Italian restaurant, Brava. You walk down the stairs. It is code.